Ashley Bocanegra was born in the Bronx, one of New York City's 5 boroughs. She was raised by her mother along with her older sister. There is no public information about her father, and it remains unclear whether he was involved in Ashley's life. The family lived modestly but maintained a stable lifestyle. Ashley was outgoing and energetic. She took pride in her appearance and had a strong interest in makeup. From a young age, she enjoyed experimenting with different styles, which made her stand out among her peers. After high school, she did not pursue a specific career path right away. Instead, she worked in retail while trying to figure out her future, but she did not have any firm plans. Around this time, she met a young man with whom she soon developed a serious relationship. They spent a lot of time together, and eventually, Ashley found out she was expecting. The pregnancy was unplanned, but they both decided to embrace this new chapter in their lives and moved in together. In 2014, Ashley gave birth to a son whose name has not been publicly disclosed out of respect for his privacy. The arrival of their son marked a significant shift. Ashley became fully focused on being a mother. Despite being young, her partner stepped up and participated in raising their child. Life in New York City was becoming increasingly challenging, with rising rent and piling daily expenses. By early 2015, they decided to move to Atlanta, Georgia, a city with more affordable housing and a slower pace of life that was not too far from extended family. This move represented a fresh start for them. They secured an apartment in a residential complex that had security cameras and on-site staff. Visually, the neighborhood appeared safe, and they hoped it would be a place to rebuild their daily lives. Although their romantic relationship eventually came to an end, they continued to live under the same roof for the sake of their son. They agreed to keep their personal lives separate until their son was older. Ashley took on most of the household responsibilities and began looking for a stable job. Eventually, she landed a position at a home improvement store, working the night shift. This arrangement allowed her to be at home during the day. It was a tough schedule, but it helped her improve her financial situation. Ashley was working toward creating stability and gradually gaining independence from her former partner, all while maintaining peaceful family dynamics. As Ashley adjusted to the demanding rhythm of overnight work, she became familiar with the store's routine. Most of her shifts took place on weeknights, and she was consistently scheduled with the same group of co-workers. This consistency helped form close-knit working relationships. It was in this environment that she first took notice of Daniel Gonzalez. He also worked at the same home improvement store and was usually scheduled on the same nights. Their conversations began with routine work-related questions. Daniel was proactive. He did not shy away from hard tasks and often volunteered for demanding assignments. He came across as calm, polite, and friendly. Although he wasn't pushy, he was often nearby when Ashley needed an extra hand. Over time, they developed a steady rapport. What started as brief exchanges during breaks slowly evolved into real conversations, and Ashley felt at ease around him. There was no pressure or signs of him pushing boundaries. Daniel earned her trust. He avoided discussing personal matters and never made suggestive remarks, but it was clear he was interested. He asked about her day, showed concern for her well-being, and offered to help even when she had not asked for it. This set him apart from the rest of the crew. With each shift, their connection grew. Eventually, they exchanged numbers and began texting outside of work. Their messages quickly turned into a regular flow of jokes, short chats about everyday life, and occasionally planning to meet before work. Their bond transcended that of mere co-workers, yet there was nothing overtly romantic about it. Everything felt natural. No one was rushing into anything, and neither made any direct moves. At that time, Ashley was unaware of Daniel's personal life. Neither he nor their co-workers mentioned that he was living with a woman and their children. Daniel never discussed who shared his home. There were no indications that he was in a relationship. In normal conversations, he seemed calm and composed, displaying no signs of stress or complicated domestic issues. They eventually realized they were neighbors living in the same apartment complex. They discovered this by chance during a conversation about their neighborhood. This made it easy for them to see each other not only at work but also during the day. Sometimes, Daniel would help Ashley carry her groceries, or they would bump into each other in the parking lot, where he would walk her to her building. To Ashley, this felt like a comfortable friendship with a reliable coworker. His proximity and willingness to help were nice perks, making him seem thoughtful. She was unaware of his actual circumstances. At the time of these events, Daniel Gonzalez was a 27-year-old living in Atlanta, Georgia. He was in a long-term relationship with Antonetta Stevens, a woman of the same age, although they were not legally married. They had been together for over a decade, having known each other since childhood, as their families were longtime friends. Throughout their relationship, they became parents to 2 sons, aged 9 and 6. However, their home life was more complicated than it appeared. Daniel and Antonetta's relationship had become increasingly strained over the years, with arguments happening more often. While most disagreements arose from everyday issues, they frequently escalated into larger conflicts. People close to them described Antonetta as having a quick temper. She could quickly shift from calm to confrontational over minor annoyances. This tendency was noticeable not only to Daniel but also to others in their circle. Daniel seldom discussed his home life with his colleagues. Only a few close friends were aware of his personal struggles, which he kept private. However, the ongoing stress at home began to take a toll on him. His relationship with Antonetta shifted from one of love to a focus on logistics, with conversations revolving around parenting, bills, and household chores. Although they still appeared as a couple to outsiders, their emotional connection was diminishing. During this time, Daniel's younger sister, Janine Gonzalez, who was 17 and had recently dropped out of school, moved in with them. She lacked a clear direction, needed a new environment to get back on track. Janine quickly bonded with Antonetta due to their shared history, having known each other since childhood and considering each other more like sisters than in-laws. In contrast, Daniel did not have a strong relationship with Janine. The presence of a third adult in the household did not reduce the tension, in fact, it increased it. Janine frequently witnessed the arguments between Daniel and Antonetta. Eventually, she began to take sides, clearly supporting Antonetta. Those familiar with the family noted that Janine openly expressed her belief that Daniel was responsible for the ongoing conflicts. This alliance between Janine and Antonetta only widened the emotional gap in the household, leaving Daniel feeling isolated. By the time Daniel started spending more time with Ashley, he was already feeling disconnected. His partner was irritable, their sons required constant attention, and his sister emotionally sided with Antonetta. The home atmosphere felt strained and unwelcoming. Daniel began spending more time outside of his home, taking extra shifts at work and staying later as a way to avoid conflicts in his life. Although these choices would later impact his decisions, he didn't express any strong desire to change his situation at that time. After a few weeks of talking at work and texting outside of their shifts, Ashley and Daniel started to meet up more often outside of work. Their conversations shifted from casual workplace topics to more personal subjects. They discussed feelings of tiredness, daily routines, and the challenges of parenting. Ashley shared her experiences raising her son, her complicated relationship with her partner, and her hopes of moving out to live independently. Daniel listened closely, he didn't interrupt her, kept the conversation flowing, and engaged with their shared difficulties. He never mentioned that he lived with a partner and 2 sons, nor did he talk about his sister. As Ashley and Daniel's relationship grew stronger, they began spending more time together. Sometimes, they would meet briefly before her shifts, while other times, they would talk outside her building. Over time, Daniel started to stay a bit longer. He would visit in the evenings, help her prepare dinner, and hang out while her son watched TV. This development felt gradual and natural, not sudden. Ashley didn't ask many questions, and Daniel didn't give her any reasons to doubt him. At that point, neither her son nor their coworkers intervened. Ashley enjoyed her independence. Everything appeared harmless from an outside perspective. Back at Daniel's apartment, things were starting to change. Antonetta and Janine began to pay closer attention to his schedule. Daniel was spending more time away from home, which did not escape their notice. Janine, who was usually at home, started to see a pattern. Daniel would leave without telling anyone where he was going and would often return later than expected. Though she didn't know his exact whereabouts, she began to keep track of his comings and goings. Eventually, she shared her concerns with Antonetta, and their suspicions grew. While Antonetta didn't confront Daniel immediately, his behavior made her feel uncomfortable. One day, Janine noticed something that confirmed her suspicions. Daniel was often seen with the same woman in the apartment complex parking lot. Although she didn't know Ashley's name yet, her appearance stuck in Janine's mind. Janine observed their conversations and noticed there were no inappropriate gestures, touching, or flirting, nothing that clearly crossed any boundaries. However, this situation raised her concerns. She didn't jump to conclusions, but from that moment, she started paying more attention. While Ashley viewed these meetings as casual and innocent, the atmosphere in Daniel's apartment became increasingly tense. Antonetta moved beyond just asking questions. She began checking his phone and closely monitoring his behavior. Although she had no solid evidence, the signs were accumulating. As a result, the trust between them began to erode. Ashley remained oblivious to any underlying issues. Daniel frequently visited, offering assistance and chatting about everyday matters, which seemed to strengthen their relationship. However, underneath these casual conversations, subtle changes were occurring. In the summer of 2022, Daniel, Antonetta, their sons, and Janine traveled to Florida for Antonetta's mother's wedding. They planned to spend a week with extended family, blending celebrations with a short vacation. The road trip was long, and they stayed at a relative's house. Despite the happy occasion, tension between Daniel and Antonetta was evident from the start. They argued during the drive over minor issues related to planning, coordination, and exhaustion. Upon arrival, the situation did not improve. Conflicts arose almost every day, and Antonetta's relatives noticed the strain in their relationship. By midweek, disagreements escalated over trivial matters. The tone of their exchanges turned increasingly sharp and irritable. Daniel often ended conversations abruptly, emotionally withdrew, and spent more time absorbed in his phone or stepping outside for solitude. Antonetta observed these changes and tried to remain calm, but her patience was wearing thin. After the wedding ceremony, while most guests were relaxing, a pivotal moment took place. Daniel, feeling tired and having had a few drinks, was outside in the yard talking to Janine. During their conversation, he expressed that he was exhausted from his relationship with Antonetta and didn't see a future with her. He also revealed that there was someone else in his life, without disclosing the name, but indicated it was a co-worker. Janine listened attentively, keeping her response neutral, though she was clearly processing the information. This conversation became a turning point. Feeling more loyal to Antonetta than to her own brother, Janine decided to share what she had learned. She informed Antonetta that Daniel had admitted to seeing someone else. To her surprise, Antonetta remained calm. Rather than confronting him right away, she chose to be strategic. Her priority was to identify the other woman. They agreed to keep their suspicions quiet and to closely monitor Daniel's behavior. Janine fully supported this plan, and they made a pact: no actions would be taken until they returned to Atlanta. Antonetta kept a calm, cheerful demeanor around her family for the rest of the trip. Though everything appeared peaceful on the surface, she was quietly strategizing to find out who the woman was. After returning from Florida, the mood in Daniel's apartment shifted. Antonetta and Janine didn't mention the wedding conversation, but they began to execute a plan they had developed in secrecy. Their goal was to find out if Daniel was really involved with a coworker. Instead of asking him directly, they decided to observe his habits and behavior. Since neither Antonetta nor Janine had full-time jobs at that moment, they spent most of their days at home, which allowed them to watch Daniel closely. Janine took note of when he left the apartment, who he interacted with, and how he acted when he returned. They also started checking Daniel's phone whenever it was left unattended or unlocked to look for notifications or messages. A few days after returning, Janine reported seeing Daniel leaving work with a young woman. They were outside, smoking and chatting. Janine noted that while their interaction didn't seem overtly romantic, there was a comfortable rapport between them. She remembered the woman's appearance, and when she described her, Antonetta suspected it might be their neighbor, Ashley. Antonetta recalled seeing Ashley in the complex courtyard occasionally, usually with her son. That evening, they decided to watch for Ashley to see if she would appear again. Over the next few days, Antonetta and Janine took turns watching the apartment entrance and the area surrounding the store to confirm whether it was indeed Ashley with Daniel. Their surveillance eventually paid off. They saw Daniel and Ashley talking and then going their separate ways. With this confirmation, they moved forward and took action. Antonetta proposed using Daniel's phone while he slept to message Ashley and lure her into a meeting, setting up a direct confrontation. Janine agreed with the plan. They now had a clear objective. It was no longer just about revealing the truth, it had turned personal. They wanted revenge. The next morning, after finishing a night shift, Daniel came home and went to sleep as usual, briefly chatting with Antonetta before heading to the bedroom. Once he was asleep, she quietly entered the room, took his phone, and brought it to Janine. Together, they started scrolling through his messages. It didn't take long to find what they were looking for. In his chat with Ashley, they found personal messages filled with emotional significance, mentions of past meetings, and small details that confirmed the two were in constant contact. That was all the confirmation they needed to move on to the next step. Antonetta used Daniel's phone to send a text to Ashley. She explained that Daniel had an argument at home, was kicked out, and wanted to meet. Ashley responded quickly, asking for his location and how to find him. Their conversation seemed typical for two people who know each other well, so Ashley was unaware that she was not actually communicating with Daniel. Antonetta kept the tone light and casual to prevent any suspicion. After exchanging a few more messages, Antonetta proposed they meet in the courtyard of their apartment complex, a small grassy area between the buildings, and Ashley agreed. After arranging the meetup, Antonetta and Janine started getting ready. They brought Janine's phone to record what would happen. They were unarmed and planned to lure Ashley outside to confront her unexpectedly and escalate things physically. Their intention was not just to have a conversation but to make a statement. They carefully chose the location. It was close enough to nearby buildings for visibility but out of sight from the main entrances. While there were surveillance cameras in common areas, they didn't cover this specific spot, offering a sense of privacy within the complex. At that time, Daniel was asleep, completely unaware that his phone was being used. Early in the morning, Antonetta and Janine left the apartment, leaving Daniel and the boys behind. They positioned themselves behind some bushes near a pedestrian path. The area was shaded and slightly away from the building entrances, but still on public property. Visibility was limited, although someone walking by might notice them. They waited. When Ashley texted to say she was on her way, Antonetta made sure the phone was recording and instructed Janine to continue filming no matter what. Minutes later, Ashley walked down the path, completely unaware of the danger that awaited her. As she neared her destination, she scanned the area, hoping to see Daniel. Suddenly, Antonetta and Janine emerged from their hiding place. Antonetta approached Ashley and loudly claimed that Ashley stopped texting Daniel. Before Ashley could reply, Antonetta attacked her. Ashley did not fight back. Instead, she tried to defend herself by covering her face with her hands and begging Antonetta to stop. Despite her pleas, Antonetta continued to hit her. Eventually, Antonetta knocked Ashley to the ground and continued to assault her with her fists and feet. At one point, she grabbed Ashley's hair and slammed her head against the pavement. Janine chose not to intervene and instead stayed on the sidelines, recording the events. Occasionally, she provided commentary, encouraging Antonetta to be more aggressive. At one point, she moved closer to capture a shot of Ashley's face, who was crying and pleading for them to stop. Despite Ashley's distress, the aggression continued. Antonetta yelled accusations, made threats, and claimed she was acting for Daniel. At one moment, she looked directly into the camera and told Janine to keep filming. Some cars drove by, but no one intervened. One vehicle stopped for a moment but then quickly left the scene. The conflict escalated when Antonetta invited Janine to participate. Janine accepted, approached, and delivered a few kicks. Afterward, both of them took Ashley's phone and walked away, with the recording still running until they left the area. Following the attack, Ashley lay on the pavement. Although she was seriously injured, she was conscious. After some time on the ground, she gradually stood up. She was unsteady. Despite the pain, she started walking toward her building. Later, surveillance footage from the apartment complex showed Ashley entering. Her steps were shaky, and her movements were slow. She was holding her side and chest, and her face had visible scrapes. Her breathing seemed labored. As soon as she reached her floor, Ashley stepped out onto the balcony and leaned against the railing to catch her breath. At that moment, her partner was coming home from his morning run. Upon entering the apartment, he quickly noticed that Ashley looked unwell. She was pale, had swollen lips, and visible cuts on her face. Her breathing was heavy, and she moved slowly. Her clothes were dirty, had some blood on them. Concerned, he asked her what had happened. Ashley responded vaguely, saying she had been attacked by two unfamiliar women but did not provide any names or reasons for the attack. She might have been too frightened or still in shock to explain further. Sensing the seriousness of the situation, her partner helped her sit down and got her some water, but her condition worsened. She struggled to breathe, experienced sharp pain in her side and head. Any movement caused her intense discomfort. A few minutes later, he took her to the nearest hospital. In the emergency room, doctors assessed Ashley's condition and quickly decided to transfer her to intensive care due to its critical nature. Medical staff observed multiple bruises, broken ribs, and potential internal injuries. Additionally, she suffered a head injury. Meanwhile, her partner stayed at the hospital, anxiously awaiting news. Ashley was put on life support and sedated, but her condition worsened. Several hours after the assault, local law enforcement arrived at the apartment complex in response to reports of a possible fight from witnesses. When the officers reached the apartment shared by Antonetta, Daniel, their sons, and Janine, Daniel was not at home. Antonetta answered the door and spoke to the officers in a calm and composed manner. She explained that an uninvited woman had arrived at their door, started an argument, and became physically aggressive. Antonetta stated that she did not know the woman and that it was the woman who initiated the confrontation. She characterized the incident as a mutual fight, mentioning that both had exchanged blows. Antonetta also noted that the woman had been previously harassing her partner at work and had come to their home to continue the harassment. She made it clear that she had not left the apartment before the incident to support her version of events. At this point, the officers had not received a formal complaint from the injured party, did not know the identity of the other person involved, and had no direct evidence of the assault. While Antonetta's account was consistent, it did not match the known facts. Doctors at the first hospital where Ashley was treated had alerted local authorities because of the seriousness of her condition. However, when police arrived at the apartment complex, the medical report was not connected to the attack. Information about Ashley's injuries and her identity came to light later. The police left the apartment without filing an official report. They only documented a verbal statement. They did not conduct a search or collect phones as evidence, which resulted in the loss of important materials. At this point, Antonetta and Janine were unaware that they would soon be named as official suspects. After the initial examination in the emergency room, doctors suspected Ashley had suffered serious internal injuries. Although she was conscious, she was having difficulty breathing and could barely respond to questions. A CT scan showed multiple severe injuries. Broken ribs punctured her lungs, there was internal bleeding around her liver and abdomen, and she had a significant brain injury with swelling. Since the hospital lacked the necessary resources for urgent neurosurgery and abdominal procedures, doctors decided to transfer her immediately to a specialized trauma center. Ashley was put on a ventilator and sedated into a medically induced coma. She was airlifted to a hospital in another part of the state, where a team of trauma surgeons and critical care doctors was ready to assist. Upon her arrival, Ashley was taken straight to the operating room. The surgeons worked to stop the internal bleeding and stabilize her vital signs, but the injuries were too severe. Her liver was partially torn, and there was significant bleeding in her abdominal cavity. During the surgery, it became evident that her injuries were not survivable. About an hour after her transfer, Ashley suffered cardiac arrest. Medical teams performed CPR for 30 minutes but could not revive her. She was pronounced dead early that morning, just a few hours after the incident. While this was happening, hospital staff submitted a report to the local police department stating that a patient showed signs of having been attacked. As Ashley was being moved, this information was relayed to the on-call officer. However, it had not yet been linked to an earlier visit by officers to the complex. Ashley's death changed the legal context of the case. The police department received the hospital's report, which indicated that the situation had turned fatal. Officers quickly connected this update to the previous complaint about a physical altercation and realized that both incidents occurred at the same address. The deceased's last name was verified through medical records and matched with entries associated with the apartment complex. The police leadership decided to send officers back to Antonetta's apartment. By this time, they no longer considered it a simple domestic dispute. The situation was being seen as a potential felony that could result in death. This initiated a formal criminal investigation. Authorities also requested Ashley's complete medical records to assess the severity and nature of her injuries. The initial medical report revealed that her injuries could not have occurred from a minor fight or mutual confrontation. The trauma to her head, chest, and internal organs indicated she had suffered a severe beating. There were multiple blows aimed at vital areas. Additionally, there were no signs of defensive wounds or any indication that she fought back, suggesting that the victim likely did not defend herself during the attack. Following the medical findings, the forensic report, and surveillance footage from the apartment complex, a criminal case was officially opened. After confirming Ashley's death, investigators returned to the complex, arrested Antonetta and Janine. They were taken to the precinct and interviewed separately starting immediately. Antonetta seemed calm but distant during her questioning. She avoided making eye contact, spoke in a low voice, and gave unclear answers. She provided short responses and repeated the same story she had told earlier, that Ashley had come to their home uninvited, started an argument, and threw the first punch. She did not mention any text messages, a pre-arranged meeting, or the use of Daniel's phone. Antonetta maintained that the incident was unplanned and that she acted solely in self-defense. When detectives highlighted discrepancies between her account and the medical evidence, she did not respond. After answering a few more questions, she requested a lawyer and ended the interview. Janine's interrogation took an unexpectedly relaxed turn. She entered the room confidently and spoke freely, showing no signs of nervousness. At times, she even laughed and made sarcastic remarks, behaving more like she was chatting with friends than talking to law enforcement. The detectives mirrored her casual tone and avoided any confrontational approach, which proved effective. Janine began to share details openly about the events, including some information that hadn't been revealed before. She openly explained how Daniel had admitted to seeing someone else, how she had passed that information to Antonetta, and how they devised a plan to message Ashley using Daniel's phone. She also detailed who initially suggested recording the encounter and how they concealed themselves until Ashley arrived. Janine's account of the confrontation was particularly striking. She openly admitted to being physically aggressive, stating that she joined in because she was invited to participate. She even described the incident as amusing. The detectives documented her statements but did not interrupt her. They maintained neutral expressions, allowing her to express herself freely. During the questioning, Janine confirmed that she had recorded the incident on her phone and still had the footage saved. She revealed almost everything Antonetta had tried to hide. Her statements were officially noted. Janine's emotional distance and complete lack of remorse strengthened the evidence that the attack was not only intentional but also planned in advance. After the interviews, investigators obtained search warrants and seized phones from everyone involved, including Janine's. Her phone contained a full video recording of the assault. The footage showed that Ashley did not fight back, and the attacks were carried out methodically with clear intent. The audio also captured mocking remarks, threats, and statements indicating that the attack was premeditated. Daniel's phone showed a message thread where Antonetta pretended to be him to set up the meeting. This was clear proof of the trick used to put Ashley in danger. As a result, Antonetta and Janine were charged with serious crimes, including felony assault and robbery. Their arrests were part of a larger criminal investigation. The charges were explained to them, highlighting the serious legal consequences they faced. Both were arrested without any resistance, but officers closely monitored the situation. Daniel later learned about the events that unfolded. When the arrests took place, he was at work. Officers came to his workplace to inform him of Ashley's death and the charges against Antonetta and Janine. He was heartbroken, having no knowledge of the revenge plan, the impersonation using his phone, or the attack itself. He stated that he could never have predicted that things would turn into such a tragedy. Daniel was asked to provide a formal statement. He confirmed that Ashley had never been a threat to anyone and that their relationship was not a secret. He also mentioned that he had never given his phone to anyone and was unaware of any messages sent from it. His account aligned with the evidence gathered, leading investigators to conclude that he was not involved in the crime. He expressed his willingness to cooperate fully and may be called to testify in court, as the fatal setup was carried out using his digital identity without his knowledge. Both suspects were found guilty and sentenced to 20 years in prison at Arundel State Prison in Georgia. Janine, who was only 17 at the time, was tried as an adult because of the seriousness of the crime. If she doesn't face any disciplinary issues while in prison, she will be released when she is about 37 years old. The impact of the crime was severe. Ashley's son lost his mother. Custody of the child was awarded to his father, who had been involved in his son's life even after he and Ashley ended their relationship. Now, he has taken on full responsibility, working to create a stable and safe environment for his son amidst the profound loss. Daniel and Antonetta's two sons also experienced the loss of their mother. Since Daniel was not implicated in the crime, he retained custody of the children and continued to raise them on his own. Despite the trauma of losing Ashley and the emotional burden of knowing their mother would be in prison for decades, Daniel remained dedicated to his role as a father. Both families were deeply affected. One child lost his mother, while Daniel's two sons were also left without their mother. What began as a situation fueled by jealousy and betrayal ended in tragedy, incarceration, and lasting pain for those who were innocent in this situation. The young lives impacted will always feel the effects of a crime they did not commit and will never fully escape from it. Heather Stiliano, a 19-year-old full of promise, energy, and hope, whose journey came to a devastating end in November 1991. Just a few months ago, Heather had arrived in Myrtle Beach, fresh out of high school in rural New Jersey, determined to build a future in the bright lights of the performing arts. She dreamed of acting, of singing. She found a small apartment near the coast and began working at a local restaurant to make ends meet. Every call home to her mother carried the enthusiasm of someone on the brink of something great. But by autumn, something in her voice had changed. Her tone grew subdued, her optimism dimmed. Her friends noticed her absence. Her mother, Susan, felt a gnawing dread she couldn't shake, especially after their last phone conversation, where Heather admitted things weren't turning out the way she'd hoped. They took it upon themselves to check in. They went to her apartment and knocked. No answer. Her car was missing. But intuition told them something wasn't right. When they managed to get inside, Heather was dead. Before we begin to untangle the mystery that surrounds her final days, we need to understand who Heather truly was. Born in 1972 in Dover, New Jersey, Heather grew up in a quiet neighborhood surrounded by the natural beauty of rolling hills and calm, suburban life. Her parents, Victor Stiliano and Susan Wright, provided a loving home for Heather and her two younger siblings. Life wasn't always smooth. Her parents' divorce created challenges, but it never broke Heather's spirit. As a child and teenager, Heather moved between towns in New Jersey and Pennsylvania, Newton, Ransom, Mount Arlington, Roxbury, each one adding to her resilience and independence. She spent much of her school years at Abington Heights in Pennsylvania, where teachers recalled her as intelligent, imaginative, and full of life. Eventually, she finished high school at High Point Regional in Branchville, New Jersey, graduating with honors in 1990. Heather didn't just leave school with a diploma, she left with a dream. She had a gift for performance, a voice that could silence a room and a magnetic energy that made people gravitate toward her. Friends described her as a burst of sunshine, always laughing, always bringing joy, always the first one to lift others up. She had that rare spark, the kind that makes you believe she was destined for something more. But fate had other plans. Heather's father, Victor Stigliano, described his daughter as someone who loved music, theater, and the excitement of crowds, which was part of the reason she came to Myrtle Beach. Back home, things hadn't been easy. Her mother, Susan, had just come out of a difficult divorce. Heather chose to stay by her mom's side for a year, helping her through the pain, the transition, and all the emotions in between. The two were close. Late-night talks about dreams, heartbreaks, and what the future could hold were a regular thing in their household. Susan later recalled one of those conversations, when Heather firmly promised that after that year was over, she would pursue the life she had always imagined. And she did. Heather packed her things and headed for the coast. Myrtle Beach had always been a place she talked about. And her family, though hesitant, supported her dream. She called often, her voice bubbling with stories about the beach, her new friends, and the job she'd landed. Susan held on to every detail, her heart swelling with pride, but behind that pride lived a mother's worry. They believed she'd make it. By the fall of 1991, Heather had been in Myrtle Beach for less than 3 months. She had established herself, far from the small towns in New Jersey and Pennsylvania she had once called home. She had found work as a waitress at Shaw's restaurant. Her apartment was modest but comfortable enough for her to sleep at night. She made friends quickly. Her co-workers, neighbors, even regulars at the restaurant, many were captivated by her warmth. But despite how things looked on the outside, Heather was struggling. In her letters and phone calls, a shift began to appear. The excitement faded, replaced with something quieter. Her words hinted at exhaustion. Just a week before everything changed, sometime in late October or early November, she had spoken to her mother again. The conversation was honest. She admitted that breaking into the entertainment industry wasn't happening as quickly as she had hoped. The path forward felt uncertain. Susan encouraged her to hang on, to come home if she needed a break. And then, no more calls. By November 11th, the silence had stretched into a week. Heather had never been the kind of person to just disappear. Even on her busiest days, she'd find a moment to call, to check in. Her mother's worry grew heavier with each passing hour. And in Myrtle Beach, the people who knew her, her friends at Shoney's, her co-workers, began to worry. Heather wasn't showing up for work, nor was she answering her phone. 2 of her friends decided to check in on her. It was a Monday, one of those quiet, chilly fall days when Myrtle Beach felt like a shadow of its summer self. They drove to her apartment, a small, squat building not far from the main drag. Her car, a decade-old Chevy she'd driven all the way from New Jersey, wasn't parked in its usual spot. That alone was unsettling. Still, they hoped for the best. Maybe she was out. Maybe she'd just forgotten to call. They knocked. Called her name. No response. The door wasn't locked. Whether it had been left that way by mistake or something else entirely, they couldn't say. But when they stepped inside, something felt off immediately. The air was thick, heavy in a way that was hard to describe. The kind of stillness that makes the hair on your neck stand up. The living room was in disarray. Furniture knocked askew, broken plastic pieces scattered across the floor like the remnants of a struggle. And then, they saw her. Heather was lying in the center of the room, her body partially obscured by the dim light. A pillow had been placed beneath her head, not tossed there, but positioned carefully. Her clothes were in disarray. It took a moment before they could even process what they were looking at. In that one devastating moment, Myrtle Beach was no longer just a place of new beginnings. It had become the scene of a tragedy. Heather Stigliano was gone. It was later confirmed that Heather had been lying there for days, about a week. Her friends didn't touch a thing. Overwhelmed by shock and fear, they backed out of the doorway and immediately called the police. Myrtle Beach authorities responded quickly. The signs of a struggle were everywhere: shattered pieces of a household iron, a kitchen knife bent out of shape, and footprints scattered across the room, larger than what Heather's petite frame would have left. Her television had been taken. Her purse was gone. So was her 35mm camera, something she rarely went anywhere without. And most haunting of all was a pillow carefully placed under her head, as if someone had arranged it after taking her life. This was not a botched robbery. This was a targeted, personal incident. The news spread quickly, unsettling residents and sending ripples through the community. From the beginning, detectives treated Heather's death as a homicide. The disorder in her apartment, the broken objects, the missing items, the disturbing placement of the pillow, all pointed to intent. Someone had meant to hurt her. Investigators wasted no time. They started with the people closest to her, friends, co-workers, anyone who might have noticed something off in the days leading up to her death. At Shaw's restaurant, where Heather worked as a waitress, her co-workers were visibly shaken. Many had admired her spark, that magnetic charm that made her popular with regulars. But some remembered something else, how she had recently seemed distracted, not quite herself. One colleague recalled Heather mentioning a man who'd started showing up around the restaurant too often. He wasn't a regular. At the time, it hadn't seemed serious. But now, in light of what had happened, the memory felt ominous. Investigators took note. They moved into the apartment complex, asking around for neighbors. Most didn't have much to offer, as Heather was friendly but kept her distance. But one woman, an older resident who lived across the hall, remembered hearing a loud noise about a week ago, around November 4th. She assumed it was furniture being moved. Throughout the initial investigation, Heather's mother, Susan, remained in constant contact with detectives. That final phone call from Heather, where she admitted feeling homesick, disillusioned, played over and over in her mind. Susan insisted that her daughter wasn't the type to make enemies. She was too sweet, too trusting. But when pressed, Susan did mention a former boyfriend. He had served as a pilot at Pope Air Force Base, and Heather had told her mother he hadn't taken their breakup well. It was a potential lead, and one the police pursued immediately. The ex-boyfriend had been deployed in Saudi Arabia during the exact window of Heather's death. His commanding officer confirmed it. So did flight logs. It was an airtight alibi. He was ruled out. Then, another clue came from Susan. Heather had gone to a party a few weeks before her death. According to her mother, she'd called afterward, shaken and unsure. She'd gotten too drunk, passed out, and woke up with the unshakable feeling that something bad had happened to her, something she couldn't fully remember. Heather had mentioned that an Air Force pilot, married to one of the women at the party, had been there. The man was tracked down and brought in for questioning. He admitted to being at the party but denied anything inappropriate had happened. His wife provided an alibi, claiming he had been home the entire week of November 4th. Investigators took fingerprints, but they didn't match any of the prints recovered from the crime scene. Another potential suspect crossed off the list. Meanwhile, the physical evidence continued to build. The footprints, size 11 sneakers, were far too large to belong to Heather. The bent knife and shattered iron told investigators there had been a struggle, one that suggested her attacker had strength. Then there was the missing car, a weathered Chevrolet Heather had driven all the way from New Jersey. Finding that car became a key part of the case. Detectives fanned out across Myrtle Beach, stopping at gas stations and convenience stores, asking if anyone had seen the vehicle. Eventually, they found someone who had. A gas station clerk, working a late shift just a few blocks from Heather's apartment, remembered seeing the car one night. But it wasn't Heather behind the wheel. Instead, it was a scruffy-looking man the clerk didn't recognize. As the months passed, the chances of Heather's case growing cold increased. The leads were tenuous. Her car remained missing. Investigators were chasing rumors. Then, on November 14th, a suspicious incident surfaced, just 400 yards from the town where she disappeared. An antique dealer in Pawleys Island, about 26 miles south of Myrtle Beach, saw the story on the evening news. Just a week earlier, a man had walked into his shop trying to sell a camera. a 35mm camera, the same kind Heather owned. The man seemed nervous and fidgety, insistent on a quick sale. The dealer, sensing something was wrong, refused the offer. But before the stranger drove away, he jotted down the man's license plate number. It was Heather's missing Chevrolet. Police traced the car south to Melbourne, Florida, where local officers had just pulled over a disheveled man in a routine traffic stop. His name was James Bernard Whipple, a 38-year-old drifter with a long string of arrests. A former construction worker, turned transient, addicted to drugs, he drifted through Myrtle Beach that fall, picking up odd jobs and sleeping wherever he could. When questioned, Whipple's most recent employer told police that James had stopped showing up around November 4th, around the same time Heather disappeared from the grid. Some of Heather's friends vaguely remembered her mentioning a man, someone who may have once slept on her couch. At Shaw's restaurant, a patron swore he'd seen someone who looked like Whipple talking to Heather during a slow shift. Not flirting, just small talk. That night, Melbourne police ran the license plate. A hit came back immediately. It was Heather's missing Chevy. Whipple didn't resist arrest. He didn't run. As if he already knew the road had ended. As it turned out, Whipple was a man falling apart. Born in 1953, he'd spent most of his life drifting from place to place across the American Southeast. His criminal record stretched across 4 states, Florida, South Carolina, Georgia, and North Carolina, marked by petty thefts, burglaries, grand larcenies, and repeated run-ins with the law. Years of substance abuse had hollowed him out, robbing him of a marriage, a family, and any semblance of stability he'd once possessed. When police searched the Chevrolet, they found a chilling array of evidence. Heather's missing wallet, her TV, the 35mm camera, a blood-soaked steak knife, broken pieces of iron, and a pair of size 11 men's sneakers caked with dried blood. A subsequent search of Whipple's motel room confirmed everything. He'd not only killed her but ransacked her house for anything he could pawn. Her personal belongings were scattered throughout the room, waiting to be sold for cash. At the Brevard County Jail, Whipple wasted no time denying involvement. While in custody, he began to confess. He told detectives that he'd entered Heather's apartment on November 4th, exactly 7 days before her body was discovered. He'd gone there to steal cash. He'd heard through a mutual acquaintance that Heather, a waitress, might have stashed away tip money. He said she knew him, perhaps well enough to open the door. Maybe she felt sorry for him. Either way, she let him in. What happened next, he described as a blur fueled by drugs and desperation. Whipple said they talked for a while. Then, suddenly, things turned ugly. He attacked. First with the iron, striking her until it snapped. Then the knife. And finally strangulation, with whatever cord was within reach. Investigators would later confirm it was a lamp cord. Yet, then, there was a haunting detail, the pillow under Heather's head. In some way, he'd wanted her to look peaceful. Afterward, he took what he could, her valuables, her car, and fled. South, to Florida. To disappear. Charges were filed immediately. Whipple was formally charged with first-degree murder, first-degree criminal abuse conduct, armed robbery, and grand theft auto. He had devolved into a predator. And Heather, a kind young woman, had suffered misfortune. The evidence against James Bernard Whipple was overwhelming. There were bloody shoes, a stolen car, and a confession directly linking him to that November night. But in cases like this, justice is not just about catching the culprit, it's about giving the victim's family some peace. Whipple's legal process began swiftly. In 1992, only months after his arrest, he entered a guilty plea to first-degree murder, armed robbery, and grand larceny of a motor vehicle. The plea deal was a calculated move, an attempt to avoid the death penalty. His defense argued for life imprisonment, hoping to spare him execution. The prosecution, led by solicitor Ralph Wilson, didn't oppose the guilty plea itself, but they demanded the harshest possible punishment. They made it clear this was no accident, no moment of lost control. Whipple had entered Heather's home, assaulted her with a series of weapons, and stolen her belongings, all to feed an addiction. In 1992, despite the plea, James Whipple was sentenced to death. For a while, the case seemed to be closed. But in 1994, it came back for a full trial. The prosecution represented its case and convicted him. They portrayed Whipple as a predator who had taken advantage of his fragile relationship with Heather to break into her home. They highlighted the forensic evidence he left behind: her blood on his shoes, a knife that matched her wounds, and unmistakable size 11 fingerprints on the carpet. His confession revealed everything. He had broken into her apartment under false pretenses, killed her in a fit of rage, and fled with her possessions. The motive was a few dollars for his next high. 40 wounds, multiple instruments of death. The prosecution argued that the brutality warranted a suitable punishment. The defense did not deny his guilt, which his own words made impossible. Instead, they pleaded for leniency. They portrayed Whipple not as a monster, but as a man destroyed by addiction. He lost control and took an innocent life in the process. They pointed to his apology in court, an emotional moment when he turned to Heather's family and said that he deserved to be punished and was sorry for all the pain he had caused. They hoped to reduce the aggravating circumstances. After deliberating, the jury returned a verdict. Whipple was guilty on all counts: murder, robbery, and burglary, and they recommended the death penalty. The judge upheld the verdict. Whipple was sent to death row in South Carolina. For Heather's loved ones, it was a difficult victory. Her mother, Susan, later said that sitting through court was like reliving the nightmare over and over. The evidence, the photographs, the confessions, it was a brutal reminder of all they had lost. Then, in 2001, almost a decade later, the story shifted again that a post-conviction relief hearing reopened the case. A judge ruled that the assault charge, one of the aggravating factors, was questionable. The evidence for that charge may have been exaggerated during the trial. As a result, Whipple's death sentence was overturned. The case dragged through legal limbo for another 2 years. By July 2003, a resolution finally came. A deal was struck between 15th Circuit Solicitor Greg Hembry and Whipple's attorneys. The state would drop the pursuit of the death penalty if Whipple agreed to waive all rights to parole. Whipple accepted. He was resentenced to life without parole and transferred to Lieber Correctional Institution, where he remains to this day. In a rare interview with the Myrtle Beach Sun News, Whipple stated that parole was a risk he hadn't wanted to take. For him, the deal meant avoiding execution. Susan kept her daughter's memory alive for years. Victor rarely spoke in public anymore. They may have had justice on paper, but Heather's loss left a void that no sentence could fill. Robert Andrew and his wife, Brenda, were no longer on good terms and had been living apart for some time. Despite this separation, it was evident that Robert still cared deeply for Brenda. Their church community in Edmond, Oklahoma, recognized his feelings. He made an effort to check in on her and their 2 children whenever possible. However, Brenda had decided to move on and had restricted Robert's access to their children. On November 20, 2001, Thanksgiving, they had arranged for Robert to take care of the kids. That evening, he dressed in his best suit and drove to their former home. During the trip, he spoke to a close friend at around 5:30 p.m. The friend recognized the excitement in his voice as he eagerly anticipated seeing Brenda and the kids again. Yet, when Robert arrived and parked in the driveway, something felt wrong. Instead of being greeted by his family, he saw Brenda standing alone in the garage. He quickly ended his phone call and approached her. Brenda immediately mentioned that the furnace had broken and that the house was getting cold, asking if he could help fix it. Robert agreed and bent down to inspect the furnace while Brenda stood by his side. Suddenly, the garage door remained open behind them, and 2 masked men entered, brandishing guns. Before Robert could react, one of the attackers opened fire, hitting him twice in the chest and grazing Brenda in the upper arm. The situation escalated so rapidly that it felt surreal. Minutes later, Brenda was able to call the police and inform them that she and Robert had both been shot by 2 masked men in their garage. Robert and Brenda lived in the affluent Landsbrook neighborhood of Oklahoma, known for its wealthy residents and well-maintained homes. The community was considered safe and peaceful, with nice cars parked on the streets and neighbors looking out for one another. Therefore, the news of the shooting shocked both residents and local police, who could not comprehend how such a violent act could occur in this peaceful area. Brenda, who had been shot in the arm, received treatment at the hospital and was later released. However, Robert's family learned of his death through the heartbreaking news broadcast at 10 p.m. As the investigation unfolded, things became even more unsettling. When the police arrived, they found no evidence of a break-in, robbery, or anything stolen from the home. Robert's wallet was still in his pocket, and nothing in the house appeared disturbed. This caused investigators to suspect that the attack had been premeditated and specifically aimed at Robert and Brenda. But why would anyone want to harm a family known for being kind, friendly, and close-knit? To gain a better understanding of the situation, investigators examined Robert and Brenda's personal lives. Robert Andrew was a Christian, attended church regularly, and was a loving father. He is a successful businessman who works as an executive at an advertising agency. His work is highly lucrative and has earned him the admiration of many. In addition to his career, Robert was actively engaged in his community and served as a deacon at his local church, where he attended services every Sunday and led early morning men's meetings on Mondays. He was known for counseling and supporting other men, which made him well loved by those around him. Above all, Robert took great pride in his family. He had a deep affection for Brenda since they first met. Their story began in the early 80s when Brenda, a high school senior, developed a crush on Robert, who was a freshman in college. She would often ask his brother Tom about him during encounters at the local pool, leading Tom to play matchmaker. The two started dating in 1982 and married in 1984. They had 2 children, and Robert was the kind of dad who truly cherished his family. He even named their first daughter Tri-City, a unique name he thought would be perfect for a future political career, complete with the catchy slogan Tri-City Electricity. This whimsical idea showcased Robert's creative spirit and sense of humor. Brenda was born on December 16, 1963, and her early life appeared to follow the perfect storybook narrative. She was raised in a strict religious household that greatly influenced her character. Valued for her discipline, she excelled academically, earning straight A's and gaining a reputation for her intelligence. Beyond her studies, Brenda was active in multiple clubs, attended football games, and twirled a baton with her high school team. On the surface, she appeared to be the ideal student, polished, proper, and well-dressed. However, Brenda was not the most popular girl at school. She was quiet and reserved, preferring to keep to herself rather than socialize at parties. While her peers often engaged in typical teenage rebellion, Brenda focused on studying and helping her classmates, which earned her the nickname Goody Two-Shoes. Her decision to abstain from smoking and drinking set her apart, making her somewhat of an outsider in the eyes of other students. Brenda and Robert seemed like the perfect couple. They shared a commitment to family and faith. Robert was a devoted Baptist, and Brenda was a dedicated Lutheran. Brenda's sister Kimberly noted that their values were very similar despite their different denominations. To those around them, they embodied the American dream, a stable, faith-filled couple with a loving family. However, their marriage was far from perfect, even if no one realized it at the time. Robert, deeply in love with Brenda, began to notice subtle changes in her behavior that troubled him. His love led him to overlook certain flaws, but the mounting tension in their relationship became impossible to ignore. He started a journal to document instances when he suspected Brenda of spending time with another man. After they married, Brenda's habits seemed to change. Robert's job often required him to relocate, leaving Brenda alone. At one point, Robert took a job in Texas while Brenda remained in Oklahoma. Although she eventually joined him, this was not the first time Robert's work seemed to take priority. Each relocation forced Brenda to forego job opportunities and friendships for Robert's career. Over time, this continual sacrifice left her feeling exhausted and frustrated. When Robert returned to Oklahoma in 1988, Brenda chose not to follow him immediately. In fact, she didn't move back until December 23, 1990, around the time their first child was born. The time apart raised questions among people, leading them to wonder if the baby was even Robert's, given their lengthy separation. Despite the rumors, Robert never doubted Brenda. He welcomed her back warmly, believing that everything was fine between them. When she settled in Oklahoma, she chose to leave her job at the bank to become a stay-at-home mom. To Robert, this seemed like the perfect family life they had always envisioned. However, Brenda had changed and was no longer the same woman he had married. They had both been active in their church community, with Robert serving as a deacon and Brenda teaching Sunday school, but her behavior soon raised concerns among their peers. Brenda began dressing in a more revealing way and styled her hair differently, abandoning the modest image she once had. One notable incident occurred when Robert invited Brenda to a formal business dinner, where executives gathered to network and discuss work. Known for being openly religious, Robert took pride in his faith. However, when he brought Brenda to the dinner, she wore an outfit that was more appropriate for a date than for a professional event, which caught the attention of his colleagues. Robert documented this incident in detail in his journal. As he continued to write, he revealed more troubling incidents in their relationship. In one entry, he noted that Brenda would buy lingerie and leave it out in plain sight on their bed. Naturally, Robert thought she had plans for a romantic evening, but she never followed through. It felt as though she was teasing him, offering something enticing only to withdraw it. This behavior became a recurring pattern, leaving Robert increasingly frustrated and confused over time. In another entry, Robert recounted a moment when he drove past a motel and saw Brenda with another man. During this time, he began to share his struggles in marriage with his friends and pastor. People close to him later testified that Brenda had become verbally abusive, frequently telling Robert that she hated him and that their marriage was a mistake. This raises an important question: why did Robert endure this treatment? Why stay in a situation that brought him so much emotional suffering? Some might suggest he was trying to salvage his marriage, holding on to hope for improvement. As a deeply religious man, Robert likely felt a responsibility to maintain his family, regardless of his pain. His love for Brenda and his belief in marriage motivated him to persevere, even as everything seemed to be falling apart. This leads us to James Pavitt, another member of their church community. James was not only a deacon like Robert, but he also worked in life insurance. Whenever Robert was away, Brenda and James grew closer, which became concerning enough for church leaders to intervene and ask them to step down from their Sunday school teaching roles. One of the most shocking incidents occurred when Brenda, still married to Robert, decided to go on vacation with James. Strangely, it wasn't just the two of them, it was a family trip that included Robert's children. Photos from the vacation showed Brenda, James, and the kids laughing and enjoying meals together, appearing like a family, with James as if he were the husband, not Robert. Robert and James were friends, having even gone on a hunting trip together. As a life insurance agent, James sold Robert an insurance policy with an $800,000 payout, naming Brenda as the beneficiary. Trusting James as a friend, Robert readily signed the paperwork, unaware that he was sealing his fate. By the summer of 2001, James had already divorced his wife, and in October, Brenda filed for divorce from Robert. The situation became increasingly hostile. Robert chose to leave their home, while Brenda openly expressed her feelings, telling friends that she hated Robert and even wished he were dead. Then, on October 26, 2001, things took a frightening turn. While backing out of his garage, Robert felt something unusual with his brakes. Worried, he took his car to a mechanic, who discovered that the brake lines had been intentionally cut. If Robert had been driving at high speed, as he often did, this could have resulted in a fatal accident. While Robert was at the mechanic's, he received a call from an anonymous person who stated that Brenda had been in a serious car accident and was in critical condition. This shocking news would cause panic in anyone. However, Robert, being skeptical, decided to call the hospital. To his surprise, the hospital had no record of anyone named Brenda. At that moment, Robert realized it was a setup. Someone was trying to trick him into driving dangerously and risking his own life. He immediately went to the police to report his suspicion that Brenda and James were plotting to kill him for insurance money. After a frightening experience involving tampered brake lines, Robert chose to remove Brenda from his life insurance policy and name his brother as the new beneficiary. However, James informed him that the policy couldn't be changed because Brenda was the owner. Things took a darker turn when it was revealed that Brenda and James had attempted to transfer ownership of the policy to Brenda without Robert's consent. They forged his signature and backdated it to March 2001. This forgery became a key piece of evidence that the police were searching for. They obtained the life insurance policy and consulted a handwriting expert for analysis. The investigators didn't only examine this document, they also looked at several other papers Robert had signed over the previous decade to check for signature consistency. Robert had a unique way of signing his name, always adding a squiggle underneath it, resembling the Christian fish symbol. This was a distinct feature he included every time he signed something. However, this signature squiggle was absent from the life insurance policy. As the investigation into Robert's tragic death continued, the police focused more closely on the details of the crime scene. Robert and Brenda were attacked in the garage, and witnesses reported hearing at least 3 gunshots. However, only 2 bullet casings were recovered, one from a .22 caliber revolver and another from a shotgun. This led the police to believe that 2 different guns were used, indicating the involvement of at least 2 shooters. Brenda reported that 2 masked men had approached the garage and fired at her and Robert from approximately 15 to 20 feet away. While her story seemed plausible initially, investigators began to spot inconsistencies. A significant concern was Brenda's blouse, which not only had blood on it but also gunpowder. This was unusual because gunpowder typically disperses when a gun is fired. The quantity of gunpowder on her sleeve suggested that the shots were fired from much closer than Brenda indicated. Her claims of being shot at from 15 to 20 feet were likely inaccurate. The evidence implied that the guns had been fired just inches away, indicating a more personal and intentional attack than she described. Further complicating matters was the discovery related to Robert's shotgun. Though it was stated that Robert owned a 16-gauge shotgun, Brenda had prevented him from taking it when he moved out. When the police searched her home, they found no sign of the shotgun. The investigation took an unexpected turn when police searched the house of the neighbors, who were away during the incident but had given Brenda a key. They found something troubling. A small opening in a bedroom closet led to the attic. Inside the attic, officers discovered a spent 16-gauge shotgun shell on the floor, along with several .22 caliber bullets scattered around. There was no sign of forced entry, suggesting that Brenda had indeed accessed the neighbor's home. Moreover, the shotgun shell found in the neighbor's attic matched the brand and gauge of the shell discovered in the garage, which further connected Brenda to the crime scene. The investigation took a crucial turn when Jan, James's daughter, provided important evidence. She revealed that she had lent her car to her father on the day of the murder because he offered to have it serviced. When James returned the car the next morning, Jan noticed that it had not been serviced at all. Upon inspecting the vehicle, she discovered a .22 caliber bullet on the floorboard. This bullet matches the brand of 3 rounds found in the neighbor's attic. When Jan confronted James about the bullet, he told her to throw it away, raising further suspicions. Investigators later learned that James had bought a handgun just a week prior to the murder. These developments painted a troubling picture, revealing increasing connections between James, Brenda, and Robert's death. On the day of Robert's funeral, investigators planned to question Brenda and James to gather more information. However, neither Brenda nor James attended the funeral, nor did Robert's children. This absence was particularly alarming, as it is unusual for a spouse to miss their partner's funeral. Instead of honoring Robert's memory, Brenda, her 2 children, and James made the drastic decision to flee to Mexico. While in Mexico, James seemed oblivious to the fact that he was being watched. He called his daughter Jan several times, asking her for money, unaware that she was actually cooperating with the FBI and sharing details about his and Brenda's roles in Robert's murder. By late February 2002, James and Brenda had run out of money. With no other options, they returned to the United States, believing they could remain unnoticed. However, their plan failed. Authorities were tracking them, and they were soon arrested in Hidalgo, Texas. They were quickly taken back to Oklahoma City to face charges related to Robert's death. The trial of James, which started in 2003, was a significant event. Throughout the proceedings, his personality remained somewhat unclear. He spoke very little, and not much information was available about his life. The jury found James Pavitt guilty of first-degree murder, resulting in a death sentence. Oklahoma, known for its firm stance against crime, imposed this sentence without much hesitation. James's ex-wife stated that despite the murder charges against him, she still cared for him and found it difficult to testify against him. She explained that during their 9 years of marriage, when James was in love, he would go to great lengths for her. During her testimony, she expressed her surprise at the moment James first suggested the idea of divorce. He claimed it was for her protection due to the challenges he faced during his time in the Special Forces, particularly related to his experiences in Korea, which he described as the only place where he felt safe. Eventually, she moved to Korea for a brief period but returned to Oklahoma City when James said he had made a huge mistake. Upon her return, she noticed a drastic change in him. He was no longer the kind and loving person she had known. Nevertheless, she maintained that James's reasons for the divorce were not entirely malicious. A year later, it was Brenda's turn to face the court. Like James, she was found guilty of first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder. The prosecution argued that Brenda fired the shot that killed Robert after James shot him first, causing Robert to fall to the ground. Evidence supported this claim, as blood splatter on Brenda's pants indicated close-range gunfire. After the shooting, she reported the incident to the police but also gave James the key to a neighbor's house so he could hide during the investigation. The neighbors had no involvement in the crime but were caught up in Brenda's scheme. During her trial, the prosecution depicted Brenda as a cold and manipulative woman with a history of infidelity. Testimonies from Robert's friends revealed their troubled marriage and suggested that Brenda had been abusive toward him. By the end of the trial, she was seen as a sadistic and ruthless character, leading the jury to sentence her to death. Over the years, there have been numerous cases in which life insurance policies have been involved in tragic murders, often within seemingly perfect families. Some argue that Brenda didn't have to resort to murder. She could have continued with her divorce, sought alimony, and received monthly support from Robert, who had a six-figure income. Instead of taking that route, she chose a darker path. Now, Brenda is on death row awaiting execution. She was recently denied an appeal. Just last year, the 10th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals upheld her murder conviction in a 2-1 decision. The Supreme Court has relisted her case multiple times, generating renewed interest in her story. Meanwhile, James has exhausted all his appeals and is now eligible for execution. His execution date was initially set for July 11, 2014, but it has since been postponed, and a new date has not yet been announced. Benjamin Field was born on October 27, 1990, in Market Harborough, Leicestershire, East Midlands. His father was a Baptist minister, and his mother was a former Liberal Democrat politician who had worked for Age Concern. He had a brother named Tom and a sister named Hannah. His family was known for their large Easter egg hunts and for having Bible readings in their garden. However, some neighbors felt that the family seemed a bit distant, as if they believed they were better than others. Benjamin's father often compared himself to Jesus, which the neighbors found odd. Growing up, Benjamin and his siblings faced high expectations to not only be good citizens but also to become leaders in their pursuits. Benjamin later reflected that none of his relationships, even those with family, were based on love. He grew up in a cold and emotionless household, which led him to feel superior to others. He became arrogant and lacked empathy, traits that persisted during his time at Bishop Stopford School, where he was viewed as distant and unlikable. A former classmate noted that he seemed infatuated with his own intelligence, while another remarked that he was always a loner without close friends. There were moments when Benjamin attempted to connect with classmates, but these efforts usually occurred when he wanted something. For example, during his campaign for class president, he interacted with students as if he genuinely cared. However, after losing the election, he stopped speaking to most of them, illustrating that he viewed relationships primarily as transactions. He often spent his time in the library, reading books and learning complex vocabulary to impress others, frequently slipping these words into conversations to establish a sense of superiority. Benjamin enjoyed arguing with teachers and often corrected them in a condescending manner, which led to frequent reprimands. His arrogance, despite his intellect, hindered his potential. While his brother had already completed his math A-levels early and was set to study music at Cambridge University, Benjamin struggled with his own A-levels and finished with only average grades. Ultimately, he attended Buckingham University to study English literature, a much less prestigious path compared to his brother's achievements. At university, Benjamin maintained his unpleasant and arrogant demeanor, quickly alienating fellow students and lecturers. His arrogance and need to show off were attempts to boost his self-esteem and convince himself of a false image. Struggling academically, he sought other ways to feel powerful, which led him to develop two key habits: compulsive lying and fabricating stories about his supposed successes, such as claiming to be a playwright. Over time, Benjamin became an adept liar, using his skills to manipulate and exploit others, which further inflated his ego. He also developed a troubling fascination with elderly people and began researching topics such as euthanasia and the loneliness experienced by older individuals. Around 2012, when Benjamin was about 22 years old, he started working at the Red House nursing home in Maids Moreton, Buckinghamshire. Instead of providing care, he began to abuse the residents and even recorded his actions. Unbeknownst to him, these videos would ultimately contribute to his downfall. Benjamin viewed his actions as a means to feel powerful, failing to recognize that this behavior characterized someone who preyed on the vulnerable. Before starting his job, he met Peter Farquhar, a 61-year-old novelist and guest lecturer, in April 2011. Their relationship quickly became official through what they referred to as a betrayal ceremony. In his diary, Peter described this event as one of the happiest moments of his life, expressing relief that he no longer feared dying alone. Peter Anthony Scott Farquhar was born on January 3, 1946, in Edinburgh, Scotland, but he spent most of his life in England. While not much is known about his early years, he was clearly academically gifted. He attended Latimer School in Hammersmith, London, before he earned a first-class degree in English from Churchill College, Cambridge. Although he was a devout evangelical Christian, Peter was also gay. During his journey to find harmony between his faith and sexual orientation, he decided to remain single and devote all his energy to his passion for English and teaching. Throughout his 34-year career, Peter held various teaching positions, including 12 years at Manchester Grammar School in the 1970s and early 1980s, and 21 years at Stowe School from 1983 to 2004. He became a father figure to many students and published his first book in 2010, which told the story of a school chaplain wrestling with his Christian faith and homosexuality. Peter was well loved in his community and cherished by friends, family, but he also faced loneliness. After the death of his mother in 2002, with whom he had lived, he felt increasingly isolated. This fear of dying alone intensified as he lacked close relationships and affection. Tragically, he could not have anticipated that someone would take advantage of his vulnerability and loneliness. Benjamin recognized Peter's emotional vulnerability and later exploited it to exert control over him. After their first meeting, Peter noted in his journal that he had a pleasant experience teaching a class at Buckingham University, mentioning a particularly engaged student named Benjamin who helped things run smoothly. It became evident that Benjamin saw Peter as an easy target, lonely and susceptible to influence. Benjamin acknowledged in his journal that he wanted to take advantage of Peter's yearning for companionship and that he began grooming Peter by pretending to share similar Christian beliefs. In truth, Benjamin lacked genuine religious faith. His true motives were power and control. To get closer to Peter, he joined Stowe Parish Church, where Peter had been a regular for 2 decades. By ingratiating himself into the church community and befriending other members, he aimed to connect with more elderly individuals. Over the years, Benjamin became a church warden, volunteered, and pursued ordination as a vicar. Between 2012 and 2013, he hinted at having romantic feelings for Peter, despite being completely heterosexual and involved with several women at the same time. He manipulated those around him and concocted excuses to explain his absences, telling Peter he was away for job training while he was actually living with one of his girlfriends. In early 2013, Benjamin devised his plan. He tells Peter that he needs a quiet space to study, prompting Peter to invite him to stay at Peter's house in Maids Moreton. Benjamin took full advantage of this invitation, visiting daily and engaging in long conversations with Peter, ensuring he always did his research to sustain their discussions. He positioned himself at the center of Peter's life, frequently expressing affection and concern. Peter wrote in his journal that he hoped God would reward Benjamin for his kindness, as he was dedicated to helping elderly people with dementia at the care home. There is a tragic irony in Peter asking God to bless the very man who would later betray him. Soon after, Benjamin was given a key to Peter's home, granting him unrestricted access. With this power secured, Benjamin began persuading Peter to alter his will to leave his house to him. Benjamin developed a new plan. In October 2013, he confessed his love to Peter, a man 40 years his senior, and expressed his desire to move in with Peter. Peter was profoundly in love with Benjamin, believing he was the answer to his prayers and someone who would ensure he wouldn't die alone. Due to his inexperience in relationships, Peter failed to recognize the risks involved and did not question why a much younger man would want to be with him. Although Peter may have had concerns, he might have been too afraid to bring them up for fear of jeopardizing their connection. Their relationship seemed to be more emotional, but it held great significance for Peter. Benjamin eventually moved in with Peter on January 3, 2014, which was Peter's 68th birthday. Peter wrote in his diary that Benjamin made that birthday special by giving him a beautiful knife made of black wood and mother of pearl. Benjamin politely asked if they could get engaged, and Peter wholeheartedly agreed to it. A betrothal ceremony signifies a formal engagement but is not legally binding like a marriage. For Benjamin, it was a clever way to secure his position with Peter and edge closer to his financial goal. However, he couldn't resist boasting about his intentions online, stating that he hadn't paid for anything and that he would stick around until the person eventually passed away, calling it a win-win situation. Shortly after moving in with Peter in 2013, Benjamin began a systematic campaign of abuse and manipulation. He ordered sedatives or obtained them from the nursing home where he worked, then mixed them into Peter's food and drink. Benjamin also rearranged Peter's belongings, hid his clothes, and deleted contacts from his phone. Benjamin found sadistic pleasure in watching Peter become confused and question his sanity. Journal entries from that time indicate that Benjamin's goal for 2014 was to manipulate Peter into changing his will. By November, he succeeded. Peter altered his will to leave Benjamin half the value of the house and a lump sum of $20,000, which Benjamin later pressured Peter to raise to $25,000. Benjamin convinced Peter that the effects of the drugs he was administering were indicative of his declining health. Benjamin misled Peter into believing he needed to organize his affairs in preparation for his death, with one caveat: Benjamin could only inherit if he had lived in the house for 2 years. This meant that Benjamin's plan to kill Peter had to be postponed until late 2015. This plan was evident in a journal found by the police, where Benjamin expressed that ending Peter's life was his sole objective for 2015. They also found a drawing he made of a grave with the word goal next to it. Meanwhile, Benjamin noted in his writings that he would continue to gaslight Peter for amusement. As 2015 progressed, Benjamin's strategy escalated. Peter, unaware that the man he trusted was secretly torturing him, endured a countdown to his demise. Between early 2015 and Peter's death in October, Benjamin drugged him at least 50 times. Initially, Benjamin used sedatives purchased online or stolen from the care home where he worked, but later he introduced hallucinogens that caused Peter to experience terrifying hallucinations. Benjamin took joy in publicly humiliating Peter. A social man, Peter enjoyed attending dinner parties and going out, including theater outings. Benjamin would drug Peter before these events, ensuring he would fall asleep, struggle to communicate, and embarrass himself. Benjamin attended these outings, reveling in Peter's struggles. Over time, Benjamin manipulated Peter to the extent that he suggested Peter had developed an alcohol problem. In the months leading up to Peter's death, Benjamin worked to convince Peter's friends and family that he was battling alcoholism, even posting about it online. Peter was drugged to the point of falling and sustaining serious injuries, which Benjamin recorded in his diary. Despite becoming increasingly aware of his declining health, Peter had no idea that Benjamin was the cause. One of Peter's diary entries captures his confusion and growing worry. He mentioned that he had been feeling tired and lethargic for a few weeks and was occasionally losing his balance. He also noted that Benjamin had been very kind. Benjamin did more than just write about his crimes, he filmed them to relive his sense of control. On at least one occasion, he recorded Peter while Peter was bedridden and under the influence of a banned substance. In the video, Peter can be heard mumbling incoherently. As Peter approached death, his journal entries became increasingly odd, as he was convinced he was losing his sanity. By July 2015, just 3 months before Peter was murdered, Benjamin had increased the dosage of hallucinogens he was giving Peter. This exacerbated Peter's condition, leading to frequent night terrors and disturbing hallucinations. In August 2015, Peter attended the launch of a novel he had written years prior, which had just been published. This event showcased Peter's declining health. He appeared confused, embarrassed, and struggled to stay awake. He had difficulty signing copies of his own book and spoke with a slur. Benjamin was present and fully aware that he was the reason for Peter's suffering. He continued to spread the false narrative that Peter was an alcoholic to isolate him from anyone who might suspect the truth. Between April and August 2015, Peter was hospitalized multiple times due to falls, hallucinations, and extreme tiredness. Each stay involved a brief admission during which he showed some improvement, but he returned home only to be drugged again by Benjamin. Benjamin was aware of a condition in Peter's while stating that he could not inherit anything until living with Peter for 2 years, a term that would expire around September 2015. Until then, Benjamin focused on torturing Peter rather than killing him. After that deadline, however, Benjamin decided he wanted to murder Peter. The constant use of sedatives and hallucinogens pushed Peter into deep despair, leading to feelings of wanting to end his life. In response, Benjamin suggested that Peter's symptoms could be early signs of dementia and implied that this might be a solution. Although Peter struggled with his thoughts, he was not ready to end his life. When Benjamin realizes that he cannot manipulate Peter into harming himself, he decides to go ahead with the murder. There appears to have been at least one unsuccessful attempt on Peter's life prior to the fatal assault in October 2015. On October 3, 2015, Peter was admitted to the hospital after being found unconscious at home by his cleaner. He had high levels of sedatives and alcohol in his system, raising concerns about a possible attempt at self-harm. When asked, Peter could not remember anything and denied any intentions to harm himself. After a short hospital stay, he was discharged and returned home. In reality, Benjamin had drugged Peter and forced alcohol into him, hoping the combination would be lethal. However, this attempt failed. A few weeks later, Benjamin made another attempt, and this time he succeeded. On October 25, 2015, Benjamin again drugged Peter, ensuring he was heavily sedated and too intoxicated to resist. To make sure Peter was dead, Benjamin suffocated him, likely with a pillow. Once he was certain Peter was dead, Benjamin left the scene. The next day, Peter's cleaner called emergency services, reporting that Peter was unconscious and not breathing. When responders arrived, they found Peter dead on his sofa, next to a half-finished bottle of whiskey. Benjamin's manipulative actions had led to a tragic conclusion. The coroner determined that Peter died from acute alcohol intoxication while at home alone. Initially, his death was not deemed suspicious, he was buried, and his will was executed. Benjamin inherited $77,000 from the sale of Peter's house, which he used to buy a flat for himself. It is heartbreaking to consider that Peter spent his final years believing he had found someone who loved and cared for him, only to discover that this trusted person was planning his death. Eventually, Benjamin was caught and taken to court, where he admitted to drugging Peter, claiming he did it because Peter's nighttime activities disturbed his sleep. One of the most heartbreaking pieces of evidence is a photo of Peter's face, bruised from the fall. In the months leading up to this tragic incident, Peter suffered from a mysterious illness and consulted many doctors, undergoing numerous tests. Meanwhile, Benjamin calculated his actions carefully, often calling emergency services to falsely suggest that Peter was showing signs of dementia. Benjamin's manipulative behavior extended beyond Peter. In November 2014, he met Anne Martin, whom Peter had introduced him to, and exploited her loneliness for his benefit. Although he was 57 years younger than her, he was able to win her affection. He even took a compromising photo to manipulate her into becoming closer to him. Benjamin gifted Anne various items, including a framed picture that said he would always be with her. She displayed it prominently to indicate her feelings for him. He also gave her a hand counter and instructed her to click it every time she thought of him. In her notes, she recorded how frequently she used the counter and expressed her love for him. Continuing his deceit, he fabricated a story about needing a new car and managed to obtain $5,600 from her. He even told Tom's brother that he was suffering from severe kidney disease and needed a dialysis machine, but that was a lie. Nevertheless, Anne believed him and transferred $35,000 to him. Worse still, he manipulated her during a phone call with the bank, making her believe that the money would save his life. She genuinely cared and told the bank that she didn't want to selfishly keep the money for herself. Benjamin's deceit didn't end there. He wrote fake messages on her mirror, pretending they were from God, to persuade her to change her will in his favor. It is absurd to think that she could be led to believe that God wanted her to leave her house to him. Fortunately, before she passed away from natural causes in May 2017, she was able to change her will to leave her money to her family instead. Anne's niece testified in court about her aunt's gradual realization of the deception by Benjamin. She described meeting him at her aunt's house after her aunt's hospitalization, mentioning his strange behavior. When asked if he had taken any money or attempted to alter her aunt's will, he denied it and claimed to be in love with her aunt. However, she found this quite laughable and suspected that his true motive was merely her aunt's wealth. During Anne's hospital stay, Benjamin attempted to visit but was denied access. In response, he called the police to inquire about the situation, revealing that his calls were more about understanding how much the police knew about him than concern for her well-being. After a decision was made to exhume Peter's body, a second post-mortem found that he had consumed less alcohol than previously thought and had sedatives in his system. Dr. Brett Locke, a consultant forensic pathologist, testified that Peter died from a combination of alcohol and lorazepam, which could have impaired his breathing, and he could not rule out the possibility that Peter had been smothered. Toxicology results indicated that Peter had been exposed to lorazepam and other sedatives repeatedly in the months leading up to his death. When police searched Benjamin's home, they found various items, including diaries with a list titled 100 clients. Benjamin explained that these were potential targets for fraud or other schemes, and the list included his own family members along with Anne Martin. Authorities also discovered books about poisoning and planning to end his life. An investigator commented that Benjamin seemed to enjoy causing pain for financial gain and control. While he denied intending to kill Peter, he admitted to lying to them and Anne, and he confessed to obtaining money using fake names. During Benjamin's trial, his friend, magician Martin Smith, faced charges of conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, and burglary. Benjamin was arrested in January 2018 and was informed of his rights during the trial, including a warning that he did not have to say anything that might harm his defense. After his arrest, psychiatrists diagnosed him with either narcissistic personality disorder or psychopathic personality disorder. On August 9, 2019, he was found guilty of murdering Peter in 2015, although he was acquitted of attempting to murder Anne Martin, who passed away from natural causes on May 12, 2017. In the same trial, Benjamin admitted to committing fraud and burglary involving both Peter and Anne. In October 2019, he was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 36 years. One family member expressed their concerns, stating that they hoped he would not be released until the authorities were completely assured of the circumstances. Martin Smith's role in the case remains unclear. He was ultimately found not guilty of all charges. Although there were suspicions that he might have been involved in Benjamin's schemes, the court did not find enough evidence to connect him directly to the crimes. Similarly, Tom Field, Benjamin's brother, was also acquitted of a fraud charge. If it hadn't been for the investigation that continued after Peter's exhumation, Benjamin might have been freed. Why do you think Benjamin Field targeted Peter Farquhar and Enmore Martin? Was it solely for financial reasons, or do you believe other psychological factors were involved? Please share your thoughts in the comments if you'd like to see more videos like this. Lauren and William Heaven adopted a newborn baby girl named Erin in the summer of 1994. From the start, Erin became a cherished member of the family, receiving the same love and care as their biological children. Over the years, she forged a strong bond with her foster sisters, creating a close-knit family that offered mutual support and encouragement. The Heaven family felt that Erin had something special and knew she was meant to be a part of their family. Growing up, Erin was shy and reserved, often struggling to connect with others. However, she found comfort in her passion for horses. From a young age, Erin developed a natural affinity for animals, and riding allowed her to express her true self. The East Tennessee Riding Club became a refuge for her, a place to escape life's pressures. At the riding club, Erin discovered a sense of belonging and friendship. The horses created a supportive environment where she could explore her feelings and build her inner strength. She spent countless hours in the stables, grooming and riding, finding peace in the equestrian lifestyle. Lauren had strict rules for her daughters, especially regarding dating. When Erin met Jonathan Corwin, she realized he was someone special, kind, respectful, and genuinely interested in her. Knowing her parents' strict guidelines, Erin hesitated to introduce Jonathan to the family. After careful thought, she decided to share her parents' expectations with him, knowing that their approval would be necessary if they were to pursue a relationship. Jonathan respected the importance of Erin's family values and took the initiative to ask Lauren and William for permission to date her. They were pleasantly surprised by his approach, appreciating his willingness to honor their expectations and recognize the significance of family. Over time, he became an important part of their lives, respecting their traditions and supporting them during tough times. He swiftly gained their trust and affection. As his relationship with Erin deepened, they officially became a couple, and it felt like he was more than just her boyfriend. He was now part of the family. Jonathan blended in well with the Heaven sisters, spending quality time with them and creating lasting memories. After graduating high school, he chose to enlist in the Marines out of a strong sense of duty. On Erin's 18th birthday, he surprised her with a proposal. Nervous but excited, he knelt down and posed the question he had been eager to ask. Erin's face lit up with joy as she eagerly exclaimed, "Yes." Lauren and William were thrilled for their daughter, confident in the strength of her relationship with Jonathan and believing he was the right choice for her. However, they were also aware of the sacrifices and challenges that come with being a military spouse. They worried about their daughter, knowing there would be times when she would be away from her family and that they would miss her deeply. Erin and Jonathan got married in Las Vegas after the Marine Corps Ball. After Jonathan finished basic training, he was stationed at the 29 Palms Marine Base in California. In 2013, while there, Erin and Jonathan learned they were expecting their first child. Sadly, just a few months later, they lost the baby. The news was devastating for both of them, particularly for Erin. During this difficult time, Jonathan did his best to support and comfort her. 4 months later, Erin took a pregnancy test and was overjoyed to find out it was positive. Eager to share the news, she decided to wait for her mother Lauren's visit to California in June, believing it would be more special to see her reaction in person. Along with announcing her pregnancy, Erin and Lauren planned to visit attractions in San Diego, such as SeaWorld and the zoo, looking forward to spending quality time together. They also intended to explore hiking trails in Joshua Tree National Park during Lauren's visit. Erin planned to go to the park on June 28th. Before leaving, she said goodbye to Jonathan, telling him that she loved him. Jonathan expected Erin to return by late afternoon, but as the hours passed without her home, he grew worried. He called her more than 50 times, but there was no response. The next morning, June 29th, Jonathan reached out to Lauren in Tennessee, explaining that Aaron hadn't come home the previous day. Lauren was immediately concerned, especially given Aaron's pregnancy and the heat. Lauren feared that Aaron might be lost in the park and was worried about how much water she had with her. Jonathan then contacted the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department to report his wife as missing, providing details about Aaron's last known location and asking for help in finding her. The detective assigned to the case considered the possibility that Aaron had driven to Tennessee to see her mother, Lauren, but Lauren firmly rejected this idea, noting that Aaron disliked driving and had a poor sense of direction. To search for Aaron, Jonathan and his Marine friends went to Joshua Tree National Park, a vast 800,000-acre area of rugged desert terrain. This challenging environment, combined with the intense heat of late June, made the search even harder. As the detective looked into Aaron's disappearance, he began to explore the state of Aaron and Jonathan's marriage. Although they seemed like an ideal couple, he quickly found that things were not as they appeared. In reality, their marriage had been under strain since the loss of their baby. Aaron's mental health had suffered greatly, leading her into a deep depression that impacted every aspect of her life, including her relationship with Jonathan. The investigation also revealed that they were dealing with financial difficulties. They were burdened by debt, which added to the tension in their marriage. Throughout the investigation, the detective discovered that Aaron had formed a close friendship with Christopher and Nicole Lee. Christopher, like Jonathan, was a Marine, which created an initial bond. Additionally, Aaron and Nicole shared a love for horses, bringing them even closer together. Nicole introduced Aaron to White Rock Horse Rescue Ranch, about 45 minutes from their military base in 29 Palms. This ranch offered Aaron a chance to escape her problems and find peace in a serene environment. As Aaron's relationship with Jonathan worsened, she became increasingly attached to Christopher. The detective revealed that Christopher, having recently returned from Afghanistan, also faced personal struggles. Their shared experiences and emotional connections through their love of horses created a strong bond. Aaron's affection for Christopher's 6-year-old daughter, Liberty, further deepened their relationship. She often babysat Liberty, providing a nurturing atmosphere that strengthened her ties to Christopher and her family. Aaron and Christopher spent hours working together at the horse ranch, and initially, it seemed innocent. However, over time, they developed a romantic connection, which caught the attention of Nicole, Christopher's wife. She informed Jonathan, Aaron's husband, that she suspected an affair between Aaron and Christopher. Jonathan was devastated to hear that Aaron had been unfaithful. Despite this betrayal, he loved Aaron deeply and wanted to work on their marriage. Consequently, Aaron ended her relationship with Christopher and reconciled with Jonathan. However, a deeper investigation into Aaron's disappearance revealed a different story. Detectives found evidence that Aaron and Christopher were still involved romantically. This information came from Aaron's close friend, Jessica, who mentioned that on the day Aaron vanished, she had excitedly talked about a special trip with Christopher. Aaron hinted to Jessica that Christopher might propose, despite being married to Jonathan and pregnant with his child. The most shocking detail was when Jessica revealed that Aaron had doubts about who the biological father of her unborn baby was. This revelation broke Jonathan's heart, especially when detectives informed him that Aaron had planned to meet Christopher on the day she disappeared. The news left Jonathan feeling sad and anxious, as he was now considered a potential suspect in her disappearance. He firmly denied any involvement, maintaining his innocence. On June 28, the day Aaron went missing, a woman driving near the entrance to Joshua Tree Park noticed a car parked by the roadside. As she drove past, she saw that the car was still there. Suspicious, she took several photos of the vehicle to document potential evidence. 2 days later, on June 30th, another individual who also noticed the car parked there reported it to the police. When officers arrived, they found that the car was registered to Aaron. The woman who took photos of the car became an important witness in the case. She shared the images with detectives, hoping they could aid the investigation. The detectives focused on the location where Aaron's car was parked at the entrance to Joshua Tree Park. While examining the area, they found a set of shoe prints that formed the loop from the driver's side door to some visible tire tracks. This led them to believe that Erin had parked her car and then got into another vehicle before she disappeared. Christopher, a person of interest, initially claimed he didn't know Erin well. However, detectives were aware of their extramarital affair. When confronted about his statements, Christopher said he didn't see it as necessary to share details with the police, thinking it wasn't relevant. Eventually, he admitted to having a romantic relationship with Erin. Despite his claims, the detectives were skeptical and informed him they had evidence showing Erin went to Joshua Tree National Park to meet him on the day she disappeared. Christopher acknowledged that they had talked about running away together but insisted he was never serious, citing his love for his 6-year-old daughter, Liberty, and stating that he would never abandon her. Christopher initially denied inviting Erin to the park with him, claiming that she had only overheard him discussing plans to visit the area. He tried to suggest that she had asked to go along. With no solid evidence against him, detectives bluffingly told him that the tire tracks found at the park matched his vehicle, suggesting he had met Erin there. This made Christopher nervous, and he confessed that he might have entered the area where Erin had parked her car, but he claimed he never saw her on the day she vanished. The detectives shifted their attention to the White Rock Horse Rescue Ranch, where Erin often volunteered to care for horses. They interviewed the ranch owner, who revealed that on the day Erin disappeared, Christopher's wife, Nicole, had sent a text stating that Christopher wouldn't be at work because he was sick. The following morning, when Christopher and Nicole returned to the ranch, they appeared tense as news of Erin's disappearance spread. The owner also mentioned that Nicole believed Erin was pretending to be missing to gain attention. During the investigation, detectives learned that Christopher and his family were planning to move back to Alaska soon, as he was nearing the end of his military service. The ranch owner had allowed Christopher and Nicole to borrow her SUV for transporting their belongings and permitted the detectives to search the vehicle. Inside the SUV, investigators found a potato launcher, which is considered an illegal weapon in California. This discovery led to Christopher's arrest, although he was released on bail on July 5, 2014. A week later, he was discharged from the Marines. Meanwhile, the search for Erin continued in San Bernardino County. Erin's husband, Jonathan, passed a polygraph test, indicating he was truthful and not a suspect. At this stage of the investigation, detectives believed that Christopher had lured Erin to Joshua Tree National Park, where he killed her and disposed of her body in one of the shafts. A breakthrough came when a friend who had accompanied Christopher on a scouting trip provided detectives with photographs from their outing. Using these photos, detectives engaged a cave expert to pinpoint where they were taken in the Mojave Desert. The expert identified the location as the Rose Peru mine. However, since there are multiple mines in the area, Erin's remains could be in any of them. Determined to find Erin, a large-scale search of the Rose Peru mine commenced, lasting several weeks as detectives meticulously searched the desert for clues. Despite their extensive efforts, the search did not yield any positive results. Throughout this process, the detectives remained hopeful for closure and justice for Erin. On August 14, 2014, while searching for a missing woman, a member of the San Bernardino Cave Rescue Team noticed a strong smell of gas coming from a mine. The team quickly sent someone down the mine shaft to investigate. Inside, they found a human leg, prompting them to swiftly recover the body. Along with the body, they collected several pieces of evidence, including a makeshift torch made from a skirt, a propane tank, and a bottle of Sprite, which were important for the investigation. The body was then taken to the medical examiner's office for an autopsy. The examination revealed that the remains were those of Erin Corwin. Further investigation showed that she had a garrote wire around her neck, indicating she had been strangled. A garrote is designed to restrict airflow by putting pressure on the throat or windpipe and usually consists of a handle and a flexible wire. Based on the evidence found at the scene, an arrest warrant was issued for Christopher Lee, charging him with first-degree murder in connection with Erin's disappearance and death. During the trial, multiple witnesses testified that Christopher had expressed interest in how to dispose of a body in the weeks before Erin went missing. Their testimonies bolstered the prosecution's case against him. One of his friends recalled seeing a white propane tank in his car that was similar to the one found with Erin's body. When asked about the propane tank, he allegedly stated that he planned to blow up a mine. A close friend of Erin testified that Erin was in love with Christopher and intended to leave her husband, Jonathan, for him. On the day Erin disappeared, she was excited about a special trip to Joshua Tree National Park with Christopher. During Christopher's trial, a DNA expert from the crime lab testified about evidence found at the scene. The expert revealed that the green t-shirt, which was used to make a homemade torch found near Erin's body in the mine, had Christopher's DNA on it. Additionally, DNA from both Erin and Christopher was found on a swab taken from the mouth of a Sprite bottle discovered beside Erin's body. The prosecution's theory in Erin's murder case was that Christopher took her to Joshua Tree National Park under the pretense of a romantic getaway but with harmful intentions. They claimed that Christopher met Erin at the park entrance and convinced her to get into his car. Instead of driving her to scenic spots or hiking trails, he allegedly took her to the Rose Peru mine. There, he is accused of strangling her with a garrote and then disposing of her body in the mine shaft. To eliminate any evidence linking him to the crime, he attempted to blow up the mine using a homemade torch made from his t-shirt and a propane tank. His goal was to destroy Erin's body and any evidence against him. However, for unknown reasons, he ultimately did not carry out the explosion. Christopher testified in his own defense, explaining to the jury that he had always intended to leave the United States Marine Corps by June 2014 to start a new chapter in his life. He also mentioned that he planned to break up with Erin and move to Alaska with his wife and daughter. On June 28, he had organized a hunting trip with Erin, hoping it would provide an opportunity for an open conversation. Christopher picked Erin up at the entrance of the park and drove her to the Rose Peru mine, a remote area known for its beauty. However, Erin expressed concerns about the location's safety and decided to stay in the car while Christopher unloaded his supplies. Once back at the car, where Erin was listening to music, they began to talk. Christopher told Erin about his plans to relocate to Alaska, and she expressed a desire to join him, emphasizing her wish to be part of his daughter's life. However, Christopher held a troubling perspective. He believed that his wife, Nicole, had discovered their daughter was being abused and that Erin was responsible. While sitting in the car near the mine, he confronted Erin about whether she had touched his daughter inappropriately. Erin became visibly nervous and, while stuttering, admitted to the abuse, which deeply upset Christopher and made him determined to protect his daughter. Christopher admitted to the jury that learning of the abuse filled him with anger towards Erin. Concerned for his daughter's safety, he left the truck to retrieve his garrote, intending to punish Erin for her actions. He then strangled her to death and dragged her body into the mine shaft to ensure she would not be found. Christopher Lee was found guilty of Erin Corwin's murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Erin's husband, Jonathan Corwin, strongly denies Christopher's claim that Erin abused Christopher and Nicole's daughter. The detectives and prosecutor involved in the case have expressed their disbelief and disgust at these allegations, asserting that anyone who knew Erin would understand she was incapable of harming that child. Lorraine Cox was a 32-year-old woman living in Exeter, UK. She is dating a man named Ellie who lives in Scotland. Although the distance between them is quite long, they have gotten used to it. At first, they only met on weekends and talked, but gradually their feelings for each other grew deeper. By 2020, they had been in contact in this way for 2 years. Despite the challenges of the distance, they decided to get engaged. Now, they are building a future together and preparing for their wedding. Lorraine is also planning to have their first child. However, in early 2020, their plans had to change for several reasons. By February, Lorraine had moved to Scotland to be with Ellie, where she obtained a temporary visa, and they spent considerable time together. When summer arrived, she wanted to return to Exeter to visit her family and friends for a month or two. This trip was not a breakup, she simply missed her loved ones. Afterward, she intended to return to Scotland and continue strengthening their relationship. Although restrictions in the UK remained strict, they were gradually relaxing, allowing public events to resume and many establishments to reopen. People eagerly took to the streets to socialize again, and Lorraine was no exception. On September 1, 2020, she arrived at her father's house in Exeter, excited to reconnect with friends. They spent the evening visiting several bars, enjoying drinks and good company, until they realized it was time to go home. Everyone left in a good mood. On September 2nd, Lorraine posted an unusual message on social media, claiming she was going to leave the country. This surprised everyone, as her only previous move had been to Scotland, and she had no plans to relocate again. She had just arrived to visit her father and intended to stay for at least a month. This sudden change in her mood and plans seemed out of character. In her post, Lorraine mentioned wanting to move about 50 kilometers from her father's house to a place called Plymouth, which she described as the first stop on her planned journey. This behavior was shocking because Lorraine was not known for making impulsive decisions, especially on such a significant scale. She had a stable life and a loving relationship in Scotland and had never mentioned wanting to move elsewhere. Now, she was considering a move toward France. Unsurprisingly, this post had a deep impact on Ellie. They had a strong relationship, making his fear of losing her understandable. Lorraine's friends bombarded her with questions. Initially, she responded willingly, but as the conversation progressed, her tone changed and mistrust grew. Those who knew her well noticed shifts in her writing style. She began using unfamiliar emojis, making odd mistakes, and her messages conveyed a sense of hostility. This worried her loved ones, as she had always maintained positive relationships with them, and there was no reason for her to display such aggression or undergo drastic life changes. Her father, Tony, who was hosting her during this time, even showed a family friend her old messages alongside the new ones. He pointed out clear inconsistencies in her writing style. Even those who didn't know her well noticed something was off. Throughout this time, Lorraine's boyfriend, who was named Ellie, was especially concerned and tried to understand her behavior. Initially, she responded to him with short, cold replies, but eventually, her answers became even more abrupt. The conversation ended when Lorraine sent him an emoji of a middle finger. This intensified the suspicion that someone else was using her account. Ellie had known Lorraine for 2 years, so the idea that the trip was related to a breakup or conflict seemed unlikely. They valued each other, which made her odd responses even more perplexing. Unfortunately, because of the distance, her boyfriend felt helpless and unable to intervene. A situation arose concerning Tony, Lorraine's father. Determined to discover the truth, he faced a challenge because he was away at the time and couldn't check his daughter's room for clues. Instead, he began speaking to Lorraine's friends, particularly those who had been with her the day before her sudden move to Plymouth. He was scheduled to return home the next day. Upon arriving home, Tony's first action was to go to Lorraine's room, where his suspicions grew stronger. He had already spoken with her close friends, and they all confirmed that no one had seen Lorraine since their breakup at the bar when everyone had left for the night. Inside Lorraine's room, it appeared as though she had never returned after her outing with friends. Her belongings from Scotland remained untouched, and nothing was missing from her room. It looked as if she had left for an extended trip without taking any of her things, which seemed impossible. The most alarming discovery was the bag she had left behind. Lorraine had diabetes and always carried a first aid kit to monitor her blood sugar levels. Her health depended on these supplies, and she never went anywhere, even for a quick trip to the store, without them. For outings like the one to the bar, she typically used a smaller bag. The fact that her larger kit was still in her room raised serious concerns about her recent plans. Tony realized that his daughter had not returned from the party, leading him to fear that something might have happened to her health. The messages she had exchanged with friends and relatives also seemed troubling. Worried, Tony sent another message to Lorraine on social media, expressing concern for her health and asking if she was okay. He warned her that if she did not respond, he would have to contact the police. The message was seen, but he received no reply. After that, Tony's and Lorraine's friends could no longer tolerate the uncertainty and began their search. They started by looking for clues in the bar where they had spent the evening on September 2nd. They interviewed witnesses, distributed flyers, and retraced the presumed route Lorraine would have taken home. It was clear that something alarming must have happened during her journey since she never came home again. Law enforcement and journalists quickly became involved. They were skeptical of the theory that Lorraine might have suffered a health crisis. Detectives believed that if that were the case, she would not have been able to send messages to her friends. Furthermore, several days had passed since her disappearance, and she would likely have been found in a hospital, but tests of recent admissions yielded no results. It appeared far more likely that Lorraine had encountered danger from someone. Journalists rushed to report on the situation, highlighting concerns over Lorraine's disappearance. They recalled that in May 2018, 2 years before Lorraine vanished, an attacker named Robert Proud had attacked a woman who strikingly resembled her. He had abused her but did not kill her, and then evaded capture for a long time. Given his criminal history, it raised fears that there could be more victims. Although he had completed his prison sentence, investigators began considering Lorraine as a potential victim. At the time of her disappearance, Robert was living near the path Lorraine would have taken home. This connection led to his arrest, and police sought to extract a confession from him. They believed he had kidnapped, abused, and possibly killed her, and that he might have disposed of her body. It was suspected that he took her phone and pretended to communicate with her friends and family to buy himself time and create confusion. There was another theory regarding Lorraine's disappearance. Some believed that Robert might have attacked her, but instead of dying, she was hiding to avoid becoming his victim again. The detectives prioritized finding Lorraine because she was clearly in danger. Robert might have been holding her hostage. The situation could have escalated, posing a significant threat. To test this theory, they began reviewing surveillance footage from cameras along Lorraine's potential route that night. Even after narrowing down the time frame, they had about 11,000 hours of footage from over 400 cameras across 120 different locations. Analyzing this footage was time-consuming, but it proved worthwhile, yielding the first clues needed to catch the criminal. Eventually, they spotted a girl who matched Lorraine's description in the recordings. After leaving her friends at the bar, she headed toward her father's house without making any turns. She almost made it home, but a few blocks away, something caught her attention: a kebab shop on the ground floor of an apartment building, which was open at night. Lorraine went inside, likely to grab a snack, and then left to eat on a bench before continuing her way home. Around 2:45 a.m., she returned to the kebab shop, but this time accompanied by an unfamiliar man. This raised alarms because he didn't appear to be just a random passerby. The footage suggested they had interacted, and he had managed to get her attention. The police continued to investigate the recordings and noted that the young man had been following Lorraine after they left the shop. This behavior was concerning, especially since she seemed to be walking voluntarily and the street was deserted. Detectives suspected the man might be a predator who targeted his victim, potentially involved in Lorraine's disappearance and the messages she had sent to her loved ones after the incident. He maintained a distance while following her, trying to remain inconspicuous, and seemed to be assessing the situation. It looked as though he was stalking her, especially since she appeared intoxicated and was stumbling. She had a valuable phone, and with no one accompanying her that night, he saw an opportunity to attack. The police attempted to locate another recording to determine how Lorraine left the building from at least one camera, but were unsuccessful. It appeared she had not exited at all. They spent considerable time reviewing the video footage, only to confirm that Lorraine had not left since she was last seen. The detectives concluded that she might still be inside, possibly being held against her will. Unfortunately, by the time they gathered this information, 8 days had passed. Given this long duration, only a miracle could save Lorraine, who suffered from diabetes. Nevertheless, her family held on to hope. The police obtained a clear photo of the man who accompanied and followed Lorraine that night. They printed it out and began distributing it through the media to attract witnesses. Initially, they visited the kebab shop and spoke with the owner. He informed them that he lived above the shop but had rented the apartment below to a young man about a month ago. This young man had moved in unofficially and was very withdrawn, to the extent that the owner didn't know much about him. The owner even expressed doubts about the young man's name. When police officers visited the apartment, they anticipated finding a crime scene. However, everything was surprisingly neat and clean. The young man living there identified himself as Christopher Mayer and showed them his identification. There was no sign of Lorraine in the apartment, and he allowed the detectives inside without any resistance. They inspected the place thoroughly to ensure that no one was being held against their will. Christopher was then shown a photo of Lorraine, along with a CCTV image in which a man resembling him was seen accompanying her to the house. He strongly denied any connection, claiming that he did not know her. However, the clear photograph made the police skeptical, as the similarities were unmistakable. A brief verbal confrontation ensued, with Christopher maintaining his stance. During this exchange, he insisted that he would never bring a strange woman to his apartment. The police then became interested in Christopher's mobile phone, which they seized for examination. They discovered that it contained Lorraine's SIM card, although the card was currently missing. This evidence confirmed that he had at least seen her recently. Further investigation revealed that a suspicious post had been made on Lorraine's social media account using this mobile phone. It appeared that Christopher had sent strange messages to her loved ones. After the unsettling incident, whatever it was, he had taken Lorraine's phone. Rather than using it for communication, he inserted a SIM card into his own phone to access her contact list and social media account. This raised further suspicions about Christopher. He was the last person confirmed to have seen Lorraine alive, and his attempts to manipulate her account seemed suspicious. It became clear that he was trying to cover his tracks, raising questions about his motives that the authorities still needed to uncover. Christopher was arrested and charged with the kidnapping of Lorraine Cox. That same day, forensic experts arrived at his apartment to investigate. They used a substance called luminol to carefully examine the area. While they found several suspicious traces of evidence, the most alarming findings were in a nearby alley. During their search of the apartment, they discovered blood and numerous signs that supported the theory that Lorraine was dead, particularly around a garbage can. The forensic team speculated that Christopher might have disposed of evidence by throwing away the body. They searched the alley and found a large plastic bag inside one of the trash containers that contained human remains. However, it was not a complete body. Some parts, including the torso and head, were missing, making identification difficult. Consequently, the case shifted from a missing persons investigation to a murder investigation, and the work continued. Detectives learned that on the night of Lorraine's disappearance, in addition to Christopher, 5 other young men were present. However, none appeared on the CCTV footage with Lorraine. These men likely entered the apartment to buy food or for other reasons, but their involvement needed further investigation. They could have unwittingly been present during the crime or could have assisted in covering up evidence. Notably, the group behaved very differently. Except for Christopher, everyone was cooperative and willing to provide information. Upon further investigation, the 5 other young men were found to be locals who lived nearby. Since there was no evidence against them, they were released. In stark contrast, Christopher was uncooperative, reluctant to talk, and often gave vague or confusing answers. He seemed to believe that the police lacked sufficient evidence against him, but they soon discovered that his real name was Azam Mangori. This revelation marked a turning point in the investigation, as detectives confronted him with the truth, signaling the beginning of the unraveling of his story. Azam claims that he changed his name because he was born in the Kurdistan region of Iraq, where people who do not follow tradition can face severe punishment, including being stoned to death. As an adult, he left his conservative homeland but still lives in fear of being hunted down and killed. To avoid this dangerous situation, he began calling himself Christopher. He had been living illegally in the UK since December 2018 to avoid returning to Iraq. Azam also possessed a high-quality fake ID under the name Christopher Mayer to evade detection by immigration authorities. This explains why the landlord knew almost nothing about the man. He was very cautious, had not attended school or worked anywhere, and lived off odd jobs. However, the interrogation ended abruptly. After admitting to these things, he refused to talk about Lorraine. His previous admissions were not significant to the police. DNA testing confirmed that the remains found in a trash bin were those of Lorraine. In Azam's apartment, DNA traces and other evidence indicated that Lorraine had been killed there because Azam had failed to clean thoroughly. The police also discovered a large handsaw and replacement blades purchased after the crime. Other items found included a driver's license, a debit card, and a wallet, all mutilated. Nearby trash bins contained bloody clothing, Lorraine's phone, and a SIM card discarded in the sewer. Unfortunately, parts of her body were never recovered. Detectives analyzed the location data from Azam's mobile phone on the day of Lorraine's murder and the subsequent days when he disposed of evidence. This investigation led them to a location on the city's outskirts known as Tin Pit Hill. During the search, they found Lorraine's torso and head, which were not well concealed. Investigators noted unsettling details. A piece of clothing was stuffed into her mouth, and a patch of skin was missing from her back, possibly taken as a trophy by the perpetrator. Unfortunately, no other body parts were located, and the remains were in an advanced state of decomposition, complicating the determination of the cause of death. The forensic expert concluded that Lorraine had likely been strangled. Despite strong evidence of his guilt, Azam continued to deny his involvement and created false stories. He even attempted to involve banned organizations in the case. The trial commenced in spring 2021. Although he never confessed, Azam and his defense team significantly altered his narrative. He now claimed to have a normal orientation and stated that he encountered Lorraine when she came to his place late at night after a bar visit. He approached her on the street and convinced her to come to his apartment for some intimacy. Azam maintained that Lorraine voluntarily came to his apartment after drinking heavily and using illegal substances. He claimed that after trying those substances himself, he experienced severe distortion of perception and lost consciousness. When he regained awareness, he found Lorraine in the bathroom, unresponsive. He alleged that he saw a puddle of urine beneath her and believed she had overdosed. Azam attempted to perform CPR, but it was unsuccessful. In a panic and without knowing the emergency number, he sat on the bathroom floor next to her body. Hallucinations then began, and he claimed to see dark creatures emerging from her mouth, prompting him to shove a piece of his t-shirt into her mouth to stop it. He pushed the cloth in so far that it could have caused her to choke. Despite being in a state of panic, he managed to find and send a video he had recorded around the same time to a friend, where he appeared calm and even exhaled smoke into the camera. He explained that he filmed the video to help himself calm down. His behavior grew increasingly bizarre. Instead of calling for help, he decided to dispose of the body and planned to flee from his relatives. Naturally, this account sounded implausible, leaving him with no solid defense. According to Azam, he was unsure what he would do after Lorraine died and kept her body in his apartment until he decided to dispose of it. When his anxiety reached its peak, he chose to throw it away. He called a taxi to take the bag with the remains to a wooded area on the outskirts of Exeter. Prosecutors noted that he seemed to be obsessed with amputation, as evidenced by the precise cuts he made, which horrified forensic experts. It was clear he had researched this topic extensively and was well prepared. That evening, Azam tried to connect with people on an escort website, seeking companionship but was unsuccessful. Later, he saw Lorraine on the street eating alone and viewed her as an ideal target. It seems that Azam may have premeditated this murder to fulfill his dark fantasies. Even with substantial evidence against him, his trial lasted 5 weeks. Ultimately, the jury found him guilty of murder and attempting to obstruct justice. He received a life sentence but is eligible for parole after 20 years, which means he could be released at the age of 44. Lorraine's boyfriend, Ellie, experienced profound grief, stating that a part of him died with her. He lives daily with this pain and struggles against despair. Lorraine's father, Tony, organized a charity march to rally support for his daughter. Participants silently walked the route she would have taken from the bar to her home, a journey she never completed. In the aftermath, Tony became an activist advocating for more CCTV cameras on UK streets to help prevent and solve violent crimes. He also started to make regular donations to an anti-abuse organization based in the UK. Even after justice was served, Lorraine Cox's family remained uncertain about how Azam was able to lure her into his apartment. Security footage showed her following him willingly. Azam claimed that he engaged her in conversation and offered her alcohol and a banned substance, which she accepted. However, Toxicology reports found no traces of banned substances in her system, and a forensic expert stated that she did not die from diabetes, suggesting that Azam's account might be false. Sadly, the truth about what happened in his apartment may never be revealed, as only Azam and Lorraine know what truly occurred. Some believe Azam exploited Lorraine's kindness by asking for help, and that she may have felt unable to refuse, ultimately leading her into a dangerous situation. On April 27, 2024, the quiet community of Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, was shaken to its core by the devastating death of 30-year-old Micah Miller, a vibrant and ambitious woman who was found dead in Lumber River State Park, North Carolina. She had been married to a local pastor, John Paul Miller, for nearly 7 years. However, the picture-perfect facade of their relationship hid a much darker truth. What secrets lay hidden within Micah and John's marriage? How could a man of God allegedly commit such a profound betrayal of trust? Micah and John first crossed paths when she was just 14 or 15 years old, as she and her family began attending the Solid Rock Church in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. At that time, John was serving as the leader of the youth group in the same church. Despite the significant age gap, John was 28 years old when he first met Micah. The two developed a friendship. When Micah turned 18, it was John who officiated her marriage to one of his friends. Both Micah and her husband were involved in the church, with Micah having several responsibilities, including working with the media team while her husband was in charge of the sports ministry. After some time, Micah became John's secretary and babysitter for his growing family. John was already married and was the father of 5 children. One day, while Micah was babysitting for John's kids, his wife discovered her husband and the babysitter in a compromising position. It was clear that the two had developed feelings for each other. The fallout from this revelation was swift. Both Micah's and John's marriages ended in divorce in 2016. Just 2 years later, the 23-year-old Micah found herself thrust into a new role as the stepmother to John's 5 children, becoming the pastor's wife. In her position, Micah took on even greater responsibilities within the church, leading worship, overseeing the women's and youth ministries, even traveling abroad on mission trip. Her dedication to her faith and the congregation was evident, but the true nature of her relationship with John remained shrouded in darkness. As Micah's role within the Solid Rock Church grew, so did the allegations of abuse and manipulation that she endured at the hands of her husband. According to Micah's own sworn affidavit, she was subjected to a torrent of mistreatment, including emotional, spiritual, financial, and even physical abuse, throughout her marriage. Micah's family and friends would later come forward with harrowing details of the torment she faced, alleging that John had hacked into Micah's personal accounts, sending messages designed to discredit her. Despite the overwhelming control John exerted over Micah, she refused to be cowed. In January 2023, Micah made the courageous decision to separate from her husband, taking the first steps toward reclaiming her freedom. This decision, however, was not an easy one, as Micah knew all too well the risks she faced in defying John's will. Just months later, in October, Micah filed for divorce, determined to break free from the shackles of her abusive marriage. This bold move was undoubtedly a testament to Micah's strength and resilience, as she faced the daunting prospect of rebuilding her life in the wake of the trauma she had endured. Micah's choice to leave John came at a significant cost. She reached out to the police multiple times after feeling that someone was following her, which added to her anxiety during her attempt to end the marriage. Micah discovered her tires had been slashed and found a tracking device on her car, deepening her fears about John's obsessive need to control her. These events made Micah feel even more vulnerable as she faced the challenges of divorce, constantly anxious about the possible consequences of her decisions. In the months leading up to Micah's tragic death, a series of troubling incidents heightened the sense of danger and mistrust in her relationship with John. As Micah tried to free herself from the marriage and establish her independence, John resorted to increasingly desperate and threatening methods to keep her under his control. In February 2024, Micah's sense of freedom was drastically affected when John had her hospitalized against her will, claiming it was for her health. He alleged that she wasn't taking her medication properly, using this as a reason for her forced admission to a psychiatric facility. However, Micah's family and friends saw through John's deceit, believing he had exaggerated her mental health issues to gain more control over her. As the divorce proceedings progressed, Micah applied for spousal support, with a hearing set for June 5. This action was a bold statement, indicating that she would not allow John to manipulate her finances indefinitely. However, tensions mounted between them in mid-March when Micah asked John for $2,000 for a trip. John refused her request, suspecting that she would not use the money for its intended purpose. He had ongoing control over their financial decisions. At the same time as this financial dispute, John used his power of attorney to have Micah hospitalized. While she was in the hospital, John took her purse, car keys, and retrieved her car from a parking lot. He claimed he did this because he was worried about what Micah might do upon her release. On the morning of April 27th, surveillance video showed Micah leaving her apartment in Myrtle Beach at 11:38 a.m. She then drove to Dick's pawn shop, where security cameras recorded her entering at 12:12 p.m. and purchasing a Sig Sauer handgun on her own. Micah's phone search history indicated that she had looked up directions to Lumber River State Park, a secluded area in North Carolina. Just before 3 p.m. that day, she made a frantic call to 911. During the call, Micah asked the dispatcher to locate her phone, stating that she was in a national park and was afraid for her life. Her last words to the operator revealed her tragic intentions. She was about to take her own life. This call has sparked intense debate and speculation. Some online conspiracy theorists claim they heard a man's voice in the background, implying that Micah might have been pressured or coerced into making the call. Others argued that the entire call was potentially fabricated, possibly created using AI technology as part of a complex plan involving John. Just over an hour and a half after Micah made her 911 call, Johnny Jacobs, a North Carolina fisherman, discovered a woman's scattered belongings. Jacobs' discovery helped lead law enforcement to Micah's body, which was found in a swampy, wooded area just off the Lumber River. Jacobs reported that afternoon, he heard someone crying in the woods, followed by gunshots. While searching for the source of the sounds, he found Micah's belongings but not her body. He later told media outlets that he saw 3 people in a boat near the scene at the time of the shooting. Jacobs said he asked the 3 boaters, "Did you hear any gunshots?" and they all responded affirmatively. However, the boaters denied hearing any crying. Jacobs eventually traced the source of the sounds to an opening in the river. 20 yards into the opening, he found Micah's fanny pack about 2 feet from the water's edge, along with her cell phone and glasses. According to Jacobs, the fanny pack contained Micah's driver's license, bank cards, keys, wallet, credit cards, and a small Bible. Micah had died from a single gunshot wound to the head. Her Honda Accord was located in the park's parking lot, where authorities found a Sig Sauer gun case, a box of ammunition, and a receipt for a firearm she had bought earlier that day. The North Carolina medical examiner ruled that her death was a result of taking her own life by gunshot. However, Micah's family strongly disagreed with this finding, noting the many bruises, scratches, and defensive wounds on her body. They believed that Micah may have been forced or pressured into taking her life rather than doing so willingly. John insists he had no role in Micah's death, claiming he was not present at the time she died. He states he was at a sporting event in Charleston, South Carolina, which is about 3 hours from where Micah's body was discovered. Several eyewitnesses have confirmed that he was at the event. His vehicle also was seen traveling on Highway 17 in Horry County at 2:22 p.m. on April 27th. The investigation into Micah's death faced challenges due to many inconsistencies and unanswered questions. For example, the presence of multiple shell casings at the scene raised suspicions that Micah could have been the victim of foul play instead of a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Additionally, Micah's family and friends believe her actions and behavior in the days before her death did not reflect someone contemplating end one's own life. She had a hair appointment scheduled for the following week and was planning to go to church with her family the Sunday. The investigation into Micah's death involved both the Robeson County Sheriff's Office and the FBI, who worked together to gather evidence and understand the circumstances of her death. However, public demand for justice grew stronger, as Micah's family and supporters did not believe the official claim that she committed one's own life. A key focus of the investigation was the suspicion of John's possible involvement in her death. Allegations of abuse, manipulation, and financial misconduct in their marriage contributed to the belief that there was more to the story. As the investigation progressed, John's behavior and comments raised further doubts about his role in the tragedy. Reports described him as increasingly erratic, with actions and statements that seemed aimed at confusing, manipulating others. Just a day after Micah's body was found in the Lumber River, John made an alarming announcement to the Solid Rock Church congregation. Instead of addressing them with the seriousness the situation warranted, his tone was casual and disconcerting. He began by stating that there wouldn't be an altar call that day and asked everyone to stand for an announcement. John then instructed the congregation to leave the church quietly and not to talk about the announcement while still inside. In a strange turn of events, he urged them to keep attending church and fulfilling their responsibilities, mentioning that he would be taking a break for several days or weeks. He then shocked everyone by revealing that his wife had died, claiming it was self-inflicted and had happened in North Carolina. John's behavior during this announcement was troubling. He seemed to be fueled by adrenaline, requested the congregation to pray for him and his children. He also mentioned that Micah had been struggling mentally and needed medication. His comments were particularly alarming because Micah's body had only been discovered less than 24 hours earlier. The coroner had not yet determined the cause of death. Meanwhile, the Robeson County Police were still investigating the case as a suspicious death, yet John had already labeled it a suicide, attributing it to Micah's mental health issues, despite the significant evidence of abuse and manipulation that had existed in their marriage. John denied any wrongdoing, asserting that the allegations of abuse were untrue and that he never harmed Micah. However, Micah's family and friends saw through his claims and refused to believe him. After Micah's death, John's actions raised further alarm. He insisted on immediate cremation and would not allow her family to see her body unless they complied with his demands. Adding to the growing suspicion, John hired a lawyer and sent letters demanding an end to the accusations against him. These letters contained subtle threats, implying that he wanted to silence anyone who questioned his role in Micah's death. As more details about John's behavior came to light, the public's call for justice intensified. Micah's family, friends, the surrounding community demanded answers and urged authorities to take action against those responsible for her death. As the investigation into Micah's death progressed, the FBI and U.S. Attorney's Office became involved, bringing their resources and expertise to the case. However, it was unclear which specific areas the federal authorities were investigating. Micah's family expressed significant concerns about the autopsy, particularly because there was no information regarding gunshot residue. They also questioned why the authorities had not conducted these tests. Additionally, the family was worried about the toxicology report, raising the issue of whether Micah was mentally sound at the time of her death or if she was under the influence of substances. There was no documentation to clarify this. The family's concerns grew when Micah's body was cremated shortly after her death, a decision made by John, which prevented the possibility of a second independent autopsy. This action only increased suspicions that John might be hiding something. As the investigation continued, various theories arose regarding John's possible role in Micah's death. Some suggested that he may have used his boat to transport Micah's body to the remote location where it was discovered. Security footage from the pawn shop where Micah bought the gun also faced scrutiny, with some believing that the timestamps were altered to support a specific narrative. Additionally, the fact that John had been reported to the police for transferring church funds into his personal account raised further suspicions about his motives and integrity. One of the most troubling findings from the investigation was the discovery of Micah's detailed diaries, which she had written to document the abuse she experienced from John. John had contacted Micah's family, trying to obtain these documents, which increased suspicions that they contained evidence against him. Micah's family stated that these diaries now belonged to Micah's sister, Sierra Francis, who was appointed as the special administrator of Micah's estate. The diaries are considered crucial evidence in the ongoing investigation, as they are expected to clarify the true nature of John and Micah's relationship and the circumstances leading to her tragic death. Micah's family and friends strongly believe that John's abusive behavior, manipulation contributed to her decision to take her own life. They highlighted the numerous police reports she filed, which detailed her fears for her safety and the harassment she suffered at John's hands. Additionally, allegations of multiple affairs and financial misconduct further reinforced the perception that John was a man driven by his own desires and willing to go to great lengths to maintain control over others. The tragic death of Micah Miller sent shockwaves through the community, led to various reactions and consequences. Following this, Solid Rock Church, where John was a pastor, became a focal point of the controversy. Church leaders reported receiving numerous harassing phone calls and messages from people seeking answers and demanding accountability. The situation was equally troubling for those directly involved in the investigation. The coroner who examined Micah's body received threats. Micah's family, particularly her sister Sierra, firmly rejected the official explanation of her death. They believed that Micah's death was planned and staged by John, and they were resolved to find the truth, no matter the challenges. Their unwavering dedication to seeking justice for Micah demonstrated their love and commitment, alongside their strong belief that the authorities had not thoroughly investigated the circumstances of her death. Meanwhile, Jacobs has become one of the most controversial figures in the Micah Miller case. On March 14, 2025, at the intersection of Iona Church Road and Raynham Road, a rural intersection 2 miles from his home, Jacobs, a key witness in the case, died in a collision between 2 vehicles. Death of key witness fuels belief in conspiracy theories. As more information about the case became available, the public's demand for action against John intensified. Micah's supporters, both in the community and on social media, called for authorities to hold John responsible for his alleged involvement in her death. Micah's family's relentless pursuit of justice and the continuous calls for accountability all highlight the deep, lasting effects of this tragedy on everyone involved. On a seemingly ordinary evening in Bolingbrook, Illinois, an unimaginable event occurred. A woman was discovered dead in her bathtub. Her hair was wet, and there was a severe gash at the back of her head. Initially, it appeared to be a tragic accident, perhaps a slip and fall, but as investigators delved deeper, inconsistencies began to emerge. The most shocking revelation: the individual who may hold the key to this mystery was someone dedicated to protecting the community. What really transpired that night, and how did this case evolve into a startling tale of deception, manipulation, and betrayal? Kathleen Savio was born on June 13, 1963, in Glendale Heights, Illinois. She was the youngest of 4 siblings, was raised by her parents, Henry Jerry Savio and Mary Savio. When Kathleen was just 2 years old, her parents divorced. Later, her mother remarried, and the family moved to a different city in Illinois. Despite financial difficulties during her childhood, Kathleen was determined to create a better future for herself. She focused on her education, eventually became an accountant. Friends and acquaintances described Kathleen as warm, friendly, and charismatic, with a unique talent for connecting with others. At 20 years old, she went on a life-changing blind date with Drew Peterson. He seemed charming and was initially a great match for her. Drew worked as a police officer in the Metropolitan Area Narcotics Squad in Illinois, a job that brought him respect and authority. Drew was born on January 5, 1954, in Bolingbrook, a suburb of Chicago, and was raised by his strict parents. Drew was an older brother to 2 siblings. In high school, he stood out as an athlete and was known for his competitive nature. During his teenage years, he started his first serious relationship with Carol Brown. After graduating, Drew enlisted in the U.S. Army in 1974 and married Carol that same year. He was discharged in 1976 and the following year joined the police force in his hometown. Within a year, he moved to an undercover role in the Metropolitan Area Narcotics Squad, where he gained recognition. By the age of 25, he was named Police Officer of the Year. However, his personal life was troubled. Despite having 2 children, his marriage to Carol ended in 1980 when she found out he was unfaithful. Carol received custody of their kids. Known for his arrogance, Drew often boasted to friends about how easily he attracted women. In 1981, he met Victoria "Vicky" Connolly, and they married in 1982. Their marriage lasted almost 10 years until Victoria decided to divorce him in 1992, citing ongoing domestic abuse as the main reason. This claim was later supported by her daughter, Lisa Ward, who lived with them from ages 8 to 18. She reported physical and psychological abuse from Drew. Until later, a troubling rumor from their marriage involved an incident after they purchased a bar together. One night, after leaving the bar, Victoria was in a car accident that required surgery. Some sources suggested that Drew might have tampered with her brakes, but no solid evidence came to light. During his marriage to Victoria, Drew began an affair with Kathleen Savio, who was unaware of his marriage. To Kathleen, Drew appeared to be the perfect partner. He showered her with gifts and affection, took her on trips, promised her a stable future. Moved by his attention, she quickly fell in love with him. When Drew eventually told her he was going through a divorce, he portrayed his wife as a banned substance addict and claimed he could no longer handle the situation. Their romance accelerated rapidly, leading to their engagement just 6 months after their first date. On May 3, 1992, shortly after Drew finalized his divorce, they got married. Over the next 2 years, Kathleen gave birth to their 2 children, but their relationship began to change. While she focused on raising their family, Drew sought excitement outside the home. What began as a loving relationship turned unhealthy. Drew's charming exterior vanished, revealing a controlling and abusive nature. At first, his mistreatment was verbal. He insulted Kathleen's appearance, calling her unattractive and making hurtful comments about her weight. As time passed, his behavior became increasingly harmful, trapping Kathleen in a marriage that was far from the fairy tale she had imagined. Drew's aggression intensified. One day, Kathleen, feeling frustrated and tired from his continual absence and lack of support with their children, confronted him. What began as a heated argument quickly escalated into violence. Drew grabbed her arm and pushed her into a table, causing her to sustain a head injury and multiple bruises. The injuries were serious enough for her to go to the emergency room. Although the hospital recorded the incident, Drew publicly denied any wrongdoing. In a televised interview, he claimed that, as a police officer, he needed to act differently than an ordinary citizen to protect his job. Kathleen decided to stay in her marriage despite the challenges. Meanwhile, Drew turned his attention to a new relationship with a much younger woman named Stacy and Callis, who was nearly 30 years his junior. He was even bringing Stacy to the home that he shared with Kathleen and their children. On at least one occasion, he spent the night with her in the basement while his family slept upstairs. Stacy, born on January 20, 1984, in Downers Grove, Illinois, graduated high school early and began working as a receptionist at a local hotel where she and Drew first met. For a time, Kathleen was unaware of the affair, but that changed in October 2001 when she received an anonymous letter that revealed Drew's involvement with 19-year-old Stacy. Although Kathleen's marriage had been struggling, this news devastated her. She confronted Drew, who denied the affair. Distraught, Kathleen called her sister, crying as she shared that not only had Drew cheated on her, but he had also physically assaulted her during an argument by throwing her against a refrigerator. By mid-2002, Drew had moved out of their home and into a new house just a few blocks away, which many viewed as a deliberate act to provoke Kathleen. The divorce was quite tense as Kathleen fought over custody, child support, and her share of Drew's pension. However, Drew was unwilling to compromise. Kathleen was a strong and devoted mother who refused to back down easily. Their disputes escalated, leading to the police being called to her home at least 18 times, each report documenting domestic arguments. One particularly alarming incident occurred on July 5, 2002. According to the police report, Drew broke glass in the house and then forced Kathleen to sit on the staircase for hours while he stood over her, brandishing a knife and threatening her life. Kathleen felt increasingly unsafe, especially since Drew was a police officer in the same department that handled her complaints. As a result, her reports were often dismissed as typical domestic issues, and no serious action was taken against him. Fearing for her safety, Kathleen sought legal protection. On November 14, 2002, She wrote a letter to the state's assistant prosecutor describing Drew's worsening violence, urgently requested an emergency protection order before it was too late. She warned that Drew knew how to exploit the system and that she feared for her children's safety as well as her own. Despite the urgency of her message, her requests were ignored. Kathleen felt helpless, alone with her children, and trapped in a perilous situation. Drew officially married Stacy on October 18, 2003, shortly after finalizing his divorce. At 49 years old, he married a 19-year-old. Soon after, Stacy gave birth to their first child. Initially, she seemed happy in her role as a stepmother, even though Drew's eldest child was not much younger than she was. Their life looked ideal. They traveled often, hosted extravagant parties, and portrayed themselves as a loving couple despite their significant age difference. However, the initial bliss did not last. Drew's controlling behavior re-emerged, and he became obsessive towards Stacy, monitoring her phone, tracking her movements, and making unfounded accusations. Then, on the night of Monday, March 1, 2004, a worried neighbor knocked on Kathleen's door several times without getting a response. Concerned, the neighbor decided to check inside and made a shocking discovery. Savio's nude body was found in the bathtub in the master bedroom of the Pheasant Chase Drive mansion. Naturally, Drew became the primary suspect, but he had a solid alibi. He was home with Stacy. He also stated that, as agreed, he had spent the previous weekend with his children and returned them to Kathleen on Sunday. Forensic investigators found no signs of forced entry or struggle in the home. Although Kathleen's autopsy showed bruises as well as a large, unexplained gash on her scalp, there were no defensive injuries. Authorities quickly classified her death as an accidental drowning without conducting a more thorough investigation. A significant detail was overlooked: the bathtub was completely dry when her body was discovered, raising further suspicions. The lead detective in the case was a close friend of Drew's, and his so-called interrogation of Drew resembled more of a casual chat between friends than an official inquiry. Stacy, supporting her husband, confirmed his alibi by claiming they had spent the entire weekend at home with their children. Kathleen's family was heartbroken by her unexpected death. Just days later, they held a touching memorial, honoring her as a devoted mother and a kind person. Shortly after this, Drew was awarded full custody of the two children he had with Kathleen. Stacy officially adopted them, creating the impression of a happy blended family. However, the facade of a perfect marriage soon crumbled. As time went on, Drew's controlling behavior became increasingly evident. By 2007, Stacy was fed up with his oppressive ways and seriously contemplated divorce. Then, on October 28 of that year, she disappeared without any explanation. Her sudden vanishing shocked her family, as Stacy had never shown any signs that she would willingly leave without informing anyone. Stacy's family began a desperate search for her and refused to give up until she was found. In contrast, Drew displayed little concern throughout the search process. During interviews, he made dismissive and sarcastic comments, implying that Stacy was merely enjoying attention and likely out dancing or with another man. Stacy's family suspected Drew might be involved, especially since she had recently told him she wanted a divorce, something he was unwilling to accept. As their suspicions grew, Drew tried to change the narrative by claiming that Stacy had changed a lot since her sister's death in 2006. He stated that she had been struggling emotionally and receiving treatment for depression. However, rather than clearing his name, these claims only heightened the investigators' concerns. Authorities began to question whether Kathleen's death was really accidental or if something more sinister was at play. Just weeks after Stacy went missing, both the Illinois State Police and the FBI reopened the investigation into Kathleen's death. In November 2007, Kathleen's body was exhumed for a second autopsy, which revealed findings that contradicted the original report. Forensic experts discovered clear signs of a struggle, indicating that she had fought for her life. As a result, Drew becomes the prime suspect in both the death of his third wife and the disappearance of his fourth wife. Instead of staying out of the spotlight, he actively sought media attention, appearing on talk shows and making arrogant, sarcastic comments as if he relished the notoriety. In January 2008, the case took a surprising turn when Drew's brother, Thomas Morphy, came forward with important information. He claimed that he helped Drew remove a large blue container from their house around the time Stacy disappeared. Several neighbors backed up his account, stating they had seen Drew with the container. Additionally, Thomas disclosed that he had assisted Drew in making a phone call from Stacy's phone, which made it look like she was at the airport shortly after her vehicle was found abandoned there. As the search for Stacy continued, the investigation into Kathleen's death advanced. On February 21, 2008, her death was officially reclassified from an accident to a homicide. About a year later, Drew was arrested as the main suspect. His legal team argued that they had a strong defense due to the absence of physical evidence, such as fingerprints, DNA, or eyewitness accounts linking him directly to the crime. As the trial progressed, accusations arose against the police department, with many claiming that Drew, having been a sergeant there, received preferential treatment and that the initial investigation was mishandled. This raised serious concerns about the integrity of law enforcement, suggesting issues of corruption and cover-ups. Exposing institutional bias alone did not establish Drew's guilt in Kathleen's murder. The prosecution needed a significant breakthrough. That turning point came when the lead prosecutor executed a strategic legal move that transformed the case. On May 31, 2012, Drew Peterson's trial began. The first witness was Kathleen's sister, Susan M. Savio. Her testimony deeply affected everyone in the courtroom as she recounted that Kathleen had confided in her about Drew threatening to kill her and make it look like an accident to avoid suspicion. Next, Neil Scory, a pastor and marriage counselor who had worked with Stacy, took the stand. He testified that Stacy had privately expressed her concerns that Drew was responsible for Kathleen's death. He recalled that Stacy once woke up in the middle of the night to find Drew missing around the time Kathleen was believed to have died. When Drew returned, he allegedly asked Stacy to lie to the police and provide him with an alibi. Further unsettling details emerged in court, including the fact that Drew had been present during Stacy's police interview, suggesting that he had pressured her to protect him. Additionally, the attorney who represented Stacy during her divorce revealed that Stacy had reached out to him just days before her disappearance, seeking legal advice about leaving Drew, and made it clear she believed he had killed Kathleen. Prosecutors claimed that Drew killed Kathleen out of fear that their divorce would leave him broke. For 3 weeks, jurors heard from 44 witnesses who shared disturbing accounts of Kathleen's case. One friend mentioned that Kathleen was so scared of Drew that she kept a knife under her bed for protection. After considering all the evidence, which was mostly circumstantial and based on witness statements, the jury, made up of 7 men and 5 women, deliberated for about 14 hours. Before the jury's decision was announced, Drew shouted that he was innocent. This caused Kathleen's brother to retaliate, accusing Drew of Kathleen's murder. Security had to step in to remove him from the courtroom. Ultimately, on September 6, 2012, Drew Peterson convicted of murdering Savio. On February 21, 2013, sentencing him to 38 years in prison with no chance of parole. Though he appeared calm during the trial, Drew's attitude changed in the following days. He directed his anger at the prosecutor who helped convict him. The prosecutor, however, remained unshaken and suggested that there might be further legal actions regarding Stacy's disappearance. Tensions escalated within Drew's legal team as his lead attorney filed an appeal, claiming that the original defense team had mishandled the trial. They argued that Drew was pressured into starting a media campaign before the trial, which ultimately harmed his defense. They also criticized the choice to call Stacy's divorce attorney as a witness, a decision that proved disastrous. Despite Drew's numerous attempts to overturn the verdict, the ruling remained intact. Kathleen achieved justice, but the fate of Stacy continued to be a perplexing mystery, with many believing that Drew Peterson held the key to the answers. While serving his sentence, Drew faced a new and shocking allegation. He was recorded in prison discussing a plan to arrange a murder for hire against the prosecutor who had led his case. He offered money to another inmate in exchange for carrying out the attack. In May 2016, he was found guilty of solicitation of murder and solicitation of murder for hire. He was subsequently sentenced to an additional 40 years in prison. Over time, Drew has maintained his innocence and persistently sought to appeal his conviction, arguing that the testimonies used during his trial violated his constitutional rights. In 2024, a significant legal development occurred when Drew's public defender requested a psychological evaluation to pursue a new trial. The judge instructed the county to conduct and finance the evaluation for Drew, who is now 70 years old. After a mandatory 30-day assessment period, the results showed that he was mentally competent to stand trial. At the same time, Drew's former attorney faced legal issues of his own, as he was charged with contempt of court. This situation arose when he allegedly breached a gag order by discussing the case in a nationally televised interview. During this interview, he claimed to have information that could clarify the circumstances surrounding Stacy's case. Although the lawyer denied the allegations, the judge reaffirmed the gag order, prohibiting him from publicly addressing the case. In the same year, Drew's eldest son, Stephen Paul Peterson, who became a police officer like his father, spoke out. He referred to Drew as his hero, highlighting that his father had always supported him and his brother. However, he confessed that dealing with the circumstances of Drew's conviction was extremely painful, making it hard for him to reconcile the loving father he had known for 36 years with the man accused of such terrible crimes. As for Drew's numerous appeals, none had been successful by that time. Stacy remained missing, and her family continued to hope that her body would eventually be found. They firmly believed that Drew was responsible for her disappearance and should be held accountable. This case generated significant public debate throughout the United States because of its many concerning elements. At its center was a police officer, an individual committed to protecting the public, who instead posed a threat to those around him. The chilling saga of Kathleen Savio's murder and Stacy Peterson's disappearance revealed a harrowing tale of abuse, manipulation, and betrayal orchestrated by Drew Peterson, a police officer entrusted with public safety. While Kathleen's justice was secured through a hard-fought conviction, Stacy's fate remains an unresolved mystery, leaving her family in anguished hope for answers. This case, marked by institutional failures and Peterson's brazen defiance, underscores the devastating consequences of unchecked power and the enduring pursuit of truth that continues to honor the memories of Kathleen and Stacy. This story unfolds in Canada and caught public attention due to its unusual developments. Nicole Porciello, also known as Nicole Hasselman, was a 34-year-old whose kindness and patience shone through her work in student support services at Templeton Secondary School in Vancouver. She was more than just a helper, she was a true mentor to students navigating the challenges of adolescence. At Templeton, Nicole specialized in supporting students with learning disabilities, crafting individualized plans that boosted their confidence and academic success. Her ability to listen without judgment made her a trusted figure, often staying late to help with homework or offer advice on personal struggles. The school was not just a workplace for Nicole, it felt like a second family, fostering genuine connections and support. Her colleagues viewed her as an inspiration, always approachable and willing to help, whether it was covering a shift or organizing school events. She was cherished not only for her professional skills but also for the warmth she brought to her interactions, often bringing homemade treats to staff meetings to brighten their day. Beyond Templeton, Nicole was deeply rooted in her East Vancouver community, volunteering at local food drives and coaching her son's soccer team on weekends. Her love for gardening transformed her small backyard into a vibrant oasis, where she taught her son about nurturing life and patience. She enjoyed quiet evenings reading novels or watching classic films, often sharing her insights with friends over coffee. These small moments defined her, a woman who found joy in connection and growth, always striving to make those around her feel valued. Outside of work, Nicole was a dedicated mother to her 10-year-old son, Ethan, whose sensitive and kind nature mirrored her own. Nicole successfully balanced her career with motherhood, pouring her heart and effort into both. She aimed to be a positive role model for Ethan, showing him the importance of kindness and how to make the world a better place. Their evenings were filled with rituals, cooking simple meals together, playing board games, or reading bedtime stories. She taught Ethan to stand up for others, drawing from her own experiences helping students navigate bullying. Her friends marveled at her ability to juggle demanding workdays with unwavering attention to Ethan's needs, from attending his hockey games to helping with school projects. Nicole's home was a sanctuary of love. On November 16, 2018, a tragic event changed the lives of Nicole's family and friends forever. Burnaby police reported a crash involving a 2017 charcoal gray Kia Sorento SUV at around 10 p.m. on Barnett Highway, a busy stretch illuminated by streetlights. Emergency services quickly arrived at the scene. The car was severely damaged from hitting a lamppost, its front crumpled and windshield shattered. A man was trapped inside the vehicle, and time was critical, every second counted. Rescuers quickly cordoned off the area. They worked closely with police and medical teams, understanding that any delay could result in tragedy. A nearby driver, stopped at a traffic light, later told police he heard a deafening crash and saw the SUV swerve violently before impact, sparking immediate concern. Firefighters used hydraulic tools, known as the jaws of life, to pry open the mangled driver's side door, their movements precise under pressure. The man in the car remained seated as paramedics surrounded him, preparing to provide medical assistance as soon as rescuers freed him from the wreckage. After several intense minutes, the rescue commander signaled that it was safe to pull the victim out. The man was carefully removed from the damaged car and handed over to the medics, who noted his dazed expression and minor cuts. The emergency services worked efficiently, with each team member fulfilling a crucial role. Medics quickly began administering first aid, checking the man's condition thoroughly, pulse steady, breathing normal. Once they confirmed his condition was stable, they transferred him onto a stretcher and took him to the ambulance, where they started preparing for transport to Royal Columbian Hospital. The victim's name was Jan Popel, a 41-year-old real estate agent known in Vancouver's competitive housing market. At the hospital, doctors immediately conducted a complete examination and diagnostic tests, including CT scans, to identify any hidden injuries. They documented a few bruises on his arms and a mild concussion, but thankfully, no serious injuries were found. Jan's condition was stable, and his life was not in danger. Nurses monitored his vitals closely, noting his calm demeanor despite the crash's severity. After receiving the necessary medical care, he was kept under observation for 24 hours to ensure his full recovery. Police officers stationed nearby began questioning him as soon as he was cleared, sensing inconsistencies in his initial account of a mechanical failure causing the crash. Jan Popel had built a successful career selling properties in Vancouver's booming real estate scene, known for his charm and persistence in closing deals. Born in Burnaby, he grew up in a middle-class family and showed early ambition, earning a business degree before entering real estate. Colleagues described him as driven but private, often deflecting personal questions with humor. His professional life thrived, but his personal struggles simmered beneath the surface, particularly in his relationship with Nicole. They met in 2011 at a community fundraiser, where Jan's easygoing confidence caught Nicole's attention. Their early days were filled with shared dreams, weekend hikes in the North Shore Mountains, late-night talks about starting a family, and plans to buy a home together. Jan's attentiveness, like surprising Nicole with flowers after a long workday, made her feel cherished. However, his insecurities emerged within a year, triggered by Nicole's growing independence and social circle at Templeton. Jan's romantic relationship with Nicole started off very well, filled with romance, deep affection, and mutual understanding. They envisioned a future together, made plans, and exchanged thoughts. However, over time, Jan began to show traits that concerned Nicole. What began as a caring desire to protect her gradually morphed into obsessive behavior. He claimed to be shielding her from negative outside influences, which led him to isolate her from friends and family. By 2013, Jan's need for control intensified, particularly after Nicole received a promotion at Templeton, boosting her confidence. He began questioning her late work hours, accusing her of prioritizing students over him. His actions escalated to checking her cell phone and social media accounts, demanding passwords to prove her loyalty. His jealousy was extreme, and he struggled to hide his aggression, often raising his voice during arguments over trivial matters like a colleague's text. At a 2015 family gathering, he shoved Nicole during a heated dispute over her talking to a male friend, leaving her shaken but hesitant to leave him. Nicole's sister, Lisa, later recalled warning her about Jan's temper, but Nicole believed his apologies and promises to change. Nicole and Jan's relationship lasted 7 years, marked by growing pain and fear. Specific incidents painted a troubling picture. In 2016, Jan threw Nicole's phone against a wall after seeing a friendly message from a coworker, shattering the screen. In 2017, he followed her to a school event, confronting her in the parking lot and accusing her of infidelity, an outburst witnessed by a colleague. Despite this, Nicole clung to Jan's sweet promises that things would improve, often citing his tearful apologies and vows to seek counseling. He vowed to find the strength to become the loving and trustworthy partner he once was, but these promises prevented Nicole from ending the relationship, even though she felt deep down that Jan's behavior might never change. Friends urged her to leave, but Nicole's compassion and hope kept her tethered, fearing Jan's reaction to a final breakup. They had broken up multiple times, but Jan always pleaded for another chance, and Nicole would relent, believing Ethan deserved a stable family. Their most recent breakup, which she believed would be permanent, happened on November 7, 2018, after Nicole confided in a friend about connecting with another man, seeking a healthier future. Jan was unwilling to accept the breakup. He didn't want to lose Nicole. Overwhelmed by jealousy, he parked his car in front of her house and shared compromising photos of her on social media, a humiliating act that left Nicole devastated. After Jan was removed from the car, the police started their investigation, led by the Integrated Homicide Investigation Team, a specialized unit for complex cases in British Columbia. They interviewed eyewitnesses, including a jogger who saw the SUV speeding erratically before the crash, and examined the accident scene in detail, collecting debris and tire marks to reconstruct the sequence of events. Their questions were designed to uncover the real causes of the crash, suspecting it was no accident. Meanwhile, firefighters finished their tasks and began to pack up their equipment before returning to the station. However, one officer, sweeping the perimeter with a flashlight, made a startling discovery. About 30 feet away from the car, in a muddy ditch obscured by bushes, lay a woman who was unconscious but still breathing. It was Nicole. Her clothes were torn, and blood soaked her jacket, alarming rescuers who immediately called for a second ambulance. Paramedics worked frantically to stabilize her, noting weak vitals and severe trauma. She was rushed to Royal Columbian Hospital, where the medical team performed emergency surgery to address massive internal bleeding. At the hospital, Nicole's condition was critical from the moment she arrived. Doctors identified multiple stab wounds, some penetrating vital organs, and worked tirelessly to save her. Her family, notified by police, gathered in the waiting room, clinging to hope as updates grew bleaker. Carmine, her brother, paced anxiously, while her father, Joe, sat in stunned silence, grappling with the suddenness of the crisis. The medical team's efforts, including blood transfusions and surgical interventions, were ultimately unable to save her life, and Nicole was pronounced dead at 3:17 a.m. on November 17, 2018. Her death sent shockwaves through the hospital staff, many of whom knew her from community events, and left her family in a state of profound disbelief. A few days later, police released a statement. Nicole died from injuries sustained in an SUV crash in Burnaby last week, but authorities discovered evidence suggesting foul play. The Integrated Homicide Investigation Team took charge, coordinating with forensic experts to analyze the scene. An autopsy was performed on Nicole's body at a forensic laboratory shortly after her death. An experienced medical examiner, familiar with such cases, carefully examined and documented the numerous injuries on her body. He found a total of 47 stab wounds, some deep and inflicted with significant force, penetrating her chest and abdomen, while others appeared more superficial, suggesting she had struggled to defend herself. The examination revealed that the wounds were made by two different knives, one a serrated kitchen knife, the other a smaller paring knife, indicating a prolonged and frenzied attack. Blood spatter analysis suggested the stabbing occurred inside the vehicle before the crash. The examiner understood that his findings would be crucial in helping law enforcement identify the perpetrator and bring them to justice, providing a clear link to Jan Popel's presence in the SUV. After the autopsy, forensic teams worked tirelessly, analyzing fingerprints, DNA, and the knives recovered from the vehicle. The official report compiled all expert findings, including toxicology results showing no substances in Nicole's system, ruling out intoxication as a factor. This report was not just a document, it became a crucial element in the murder investigation, providing investigators with essential information to move forward. A hit detectives cross-referenced phone records, revealing Jan's threatening texts to Nicole days before the murder, and secured surveillance footage from a nearby gas station showing the SUV's erratic path. Interviews with Nicole's friends confirmed Jan's abusive history, including a coworker who witnessed his 2017 outburst, bolstering the case. In the wake of Nicole's death, her family, friends, and colleagues were overwhelmed with deep sorrow that hit them unexpectedly and intensely. It was incredibly difficult for her family to accept that they would never again hug their beloved mother, daughter, and sister, hear her voice, or create new memories together. Joe Porciello, Nicole's father, withdrew into grief, haunted by memories of her infectious smile. Lisa, her sister, struggled to explain the loss to Ethan, who asked daily when his mother would return. Nicole's friends, who had shared her most heartfelt dreams and experiences, felt they had lost a true companion. They remembered how hard she had worked to rebuild her life, start anew, and pursue her happiness, particularly after years of enduring Jan's control. At Templeton, teachers and students created a memorial garden in Nicole's honor, planting her favorite sunflowers as a tribute to her nurturing spirit. The school's principal issued a statement praising Nicole's dedication, noting how she transformed lives with her empathy. The holidays were particularly difficult for Nicole's family. Her brother, Carmine Porciello, felt he would never fully accept that his little sister was gone. During family dinners, "It's impossible not to notice her empty seat," he said, indicating where she would have sat, her absence a palpable void. Ethan, now living with his grandparents, withdrew from hockey, struggling to process his mother's absence. Community members rallied around the family, organizing vigils and fundraisers to support Ethan's future, a testament to Nicole's widespread influence. On November 29, 2018, Jan Popel was arrested and charged with second-degree murder in connection with Nicole Porciello's death. A hit confirmed the incident was isolated, involving known parties, posing no threat to public safety. Detectives worked hard to gather and secure all evidence, including Jan's blood-stained jacket and the video he recorded, which became a cornerstone of the prosecution's case. Reconstructing the timeline of events was vital to the investigation. A hit's analysis of surveillance footage, phone records, and text messages clarified Nicole's whereabouts and Jan's actions. A chilling text from Jan on November 15 read, "You'll regret leaving me," contradicting his claim of an amicable split. This organization of details revealed inconsistencies in Jan's statements, such as his assertion that the crash was accidental, and allowed investigators to assess his premeditated intent. As previously noted, Nicole and Jan's relationship spanned several years, marked by a pattern of breakups and reconciliations. 9 days before her death, Nicole told Jan their relationship was over, confiding in a friend about her hope for a new start with another man, which amplified Jan's jealousy immensely. On the evening of November 16, Jan picked up Nicole in a rental car while Ethan was at hockey practice. They got into an argument, during which Jan pulled out 2 kitchen knives and stabbed Nicole repeatedly in the passenger seat. Instead of calling for help, Jan took off his bloody jacket, used his phone to record a video, and tried to capture the moment in a misguided attempt to document her suffering. In the video, Nicole could be heard gasping, "He loves she," but Jan showed no remorse, saying, "She brought this on herself." He claimed he stabbed her because he couldn't accept her moving on. After the attack, Jan drove home, leaving Nicole bleeding in the car while he went inside to send emails, including one resigning from his job. For 2 hours, as Nicole clung to life, Jan paid bills and shopped online for a TV and dishwasher, actions later described by prosecutors as callously indifferent. When he returned to the rental car, finding Nicole still alive, he allegedly decided to stage a crash to mask the murder. When Jan accelerated rapidly and crashed into a streetlight, Nicole, who wasn't wearing a seatbelt, was ejected from the vehicle, landing in the ditch where she was found. The deliberate high-speed impact, confirmed by skid marks, supported a hit's theory of premeditation. As a result of the gathered evidence, Jan faced charges of second-degree murder. The legal process began with a preliminary hearing in 2019, but Jan's guilty plea on December 15, 2020, expedited proceedings, avoiding a full trial. Sentencing hearings, held in March and April 2021, were a difficult time for Nicole's family and friends, who filled the Vancouver courtroom seeking closure. During the sentencing, a video recorded by Jan after stabbing Nicole was shown to the court. The judge, Justice Kathleen Kerr, cautioned that it contained graphic content and urged anyone who might feel uncomfortable to exit. The 1-minute video depicted Nicole, severely injured and struggling to breathe, while Jan accused her of disrespecting him. "You just took from me and disrespected me for months and years," he said, his voice cold and unyielding. Nicole's father, Joe, visibly upset, left the courtroom, unable to bear the footage. As the video played, Jan sat with his head down in the prisoner's dock. Carmine yelled, "Look at the video. Raise your head," prompting Justice Kerr to call a 15-minute break to ease tensions. After the video, 4 victim impact statements were shared. Joe described Nicole as a beautiful soul and the foundation of their family, saying, "He has destroyed our family. We cannot forgive him for what he has done." Carmine expressed that the crime left him feeling like a zombie, filled with anger and rage. Ethan, through a written statement read by a counselor, shared that his mother was his best friend and that he felt a part of his heart was lost. Nicole's friend, Sarah, spoke of her infectious positivity, urging the court to honor her memory with justice. Justice Kerr characterized Jan's actions as heartless, cruel, and self-centered, but noted his guilty plea as a sign of limited remorse. Joe disagreed, telling reporters Jan seemed unfazed, like he was on a lunch break. Jan Popel pleaded guilty to second-degree murder, which carries an automatic life sentence. The Crown sought 15 years before parole eligibility, citing the crime's brutality and Jan's abusive history, while his attorney argued for 10 years, emphasizing his plea. Neither option comforted Nicole's family, particularly her cousin, Gina Iuliano, who believed first-degree murder charges, with a minimum 25 years, were warranted given the premeditation. In the week before sentencing, Nicole's friends and family launched a social media campaign, Justice for Nicole, to highlight her death's impact and demand stricter domestic violence laws. Posts shared her story, photos from school events, and calls for systemic change, gaining thousands of supporters. In a statement to the court, Jan expressed regret, claiming he never meant for this to happen. On April 13, 2021, Justice Kerr sentenced him to life in prison with parole eligibility after 15 years, balancing the crime's severity with his plea. Nicole's family felt the sentence was too lenient, telling reporters outside the courthouse that Canada's justice system failed victims of domestic violence. Gina vowed to advocate for tougher laws, joining local groups to raise awareness. Nicole Porciello's vibrant life, marked by her unwavering kindness and dedication as a mother and mentor, was brutally ended on November 16, 2018, by Jan Popel's jealousy-fueled violence. While Popel's life sentence with 15 years until parole brought some justice, Nicole's family deems it insufficient, their pain deepened by her absence at family dinners. Her legacy endures through the love she instilled in her son and the students she guided at Templeton Secondary School, where her warmth remains a guiding light. The family's social media campaign and outspoken grief have sparked calls for stronger protections against domestic violence, ensuring Nicole's memory fuels a fight for justice. Though her loss leaves an unfillable void, Nicole's spirit inspires a commitment to a safer, kinder world.